I remember the smell of old varnish in my father's dining room. It mixed with the sweetness of bourbon and the sharp scent of expensive perfume. I had not been home in 3 years, and somehow every inch of that house still carried Lorraine's fingerprints. She was arranging silver forks as if they were weapons, giving orders like a commander without rank. My father's 60th birthday dinner had just begun when the air shifted from awkward to dangerous. Lorraine's daughter, Chloe, had too much wine and too much pride. She laughed at my uniform, said it was cute that I still played soldier. I let it go. Then she mentioned my mother, Evelyn, her voice dripping poison. She called her the charity case who never moved on. My hands froze around the glass. I had promised myself I would stay calm, but something in me trembled. My father said nothing. Lorraine smiled. That silence was the final permission Chloe needed. She stood swaying, holding a crystal glass like it was a trophy. Tell her mom, tell Harper what you really think of her showing up here in uniform acting like a hero. I didn't want to make a scene. I stood up quietly and said, "That's enough, Chloe." She smirked, took a step closer. The room fell silent except for the tick of the grandfather clock. Then she threw the glass. It missed me and shattered near the wall. I saw Evelyn flinch from the corner of my eye. She had followed me here earlier, hoping to talk to my father. Lorraine's face twisted. She shouted across the table, "Break her legs!" Those words snapped through the air like a whip. I had heard screams in training in the field, but this came from home. Chloe lunged her heels, scraping the hardwood fingers, reaching for me. Training took over. I grabbed her wrist, twisted just enough to redirect her momentum. She lost balance, stumbled backward, and fell against the dining table's edge. The crash echoed through the chandelier's glass drops. For a second, I thought she was faking the pain, but she lay there, groaning, the wine spreading like blood across the white cloth. Lorraine shrieked, "You attacked her!" My father rose, stammering. Evelyn gasped my name. I was breathing steady, heart pounding but controlled. My instinct was to call for medical help, not defend myself. I pressed my fingers to Chloe's neck. Pulse steady, just shock. "Someone call 911. I said firmly. Lorraine slapped my hand away and shouted at my father, "Do something." I looked at him, waiting for the father who used to teach me right from wrong. He couldn't meet my eyes. Outside, someone must have heard the commotion because the distant wail of sirens grew louder. In that strange calm before they arrived, I heard Lorraine whisper, almost trembling with rage, "You've ruined this family." 2 police cars stopped outside, red and blue lights painting the curtains. Officer Brandt entered firsthand near his holster, scanning the room. I raised my palms slightly, voice steady. "I'm Captain Harper Kincaid, Military Police Fort Liberty. There's been an incident. 1 injury." Lorraine interrupted. "She attacked my daughter." I pointed to the shattered glass, the overturned chair, Chloe still conscious but crying. Brandt looked between us. "Who called it in?" No one answered. I could tell he was assessing posture tone injuries the way we were trained to. Lorraine grabbed his sleeve, pleading, "You have to arrest her." He looked at me again. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" "No, sir." "Weapon involved?" "Just a wine glass." He exhaled. "All right, everyone stays calm." Then another officer entered, turning on his body camera. The red light blinked. Lorraine screamed again, louder now, trying to drown out the truth. "She's dangerous." "She could have killed her." Brandt's voice was sharp. "Ma'am, step back. Let us handle this." I stood silent, disciplined. Evelyn reached for my hand, whispering, "Tell them what happened." I said, "It's on the camera." Brandt frowned. "What camera?" I pointed at my uniform. Every military police officer wears a personal body cam when off duty within North Carolina jurisdiction. It had recorded everything from the first insult to the fall. I pressed playback. Lorraine's voice filled the room. "Break her legs." The officers went still. Brandt's eyes shifted to me, then to the others. "That'll do," he said quietly. Chloe was already being helped up, pale but conscious. Lorraine backed away as if the evidence itself burned her. My father finally spoke, voice shaking Harper. "You didn't have to." I cut him off gently. I reacted to a threat. "She's lucky it wasn't worse." When the paramedics carried Chloe out, Lorraine turned to me with hate so raw it felt like heat. "You'll pay for this," she hissed. Brant placed a soft hand on my shoulder. Captain, I need to take you to the station for a statement. Standard procedure. Outside, under the flashing lights, I watched the ambulance doors close on Chloe. I had done nothing wrong, but the neighbors watching from their porches wouldn't see that. They would only see the soldier in cuffs. And in that moment, I realized something chilling. Justice may have rules, but family doesn't. The police station smelled like old coffee and metal polish. I sat on a narrow bench with my wrists free, but my dignity tied tight. Officer Brant filled out forms behind the glass partition, occasionally glancing at me through the reflection. My uniform jacket hung over the chair, the Fort Liberty patch visible. He noticed it, but said nothing yet. I stayed quiet, remembering my own training. Never argue, never fill silence with weakness. When he finally approached clipboard in hand, he said, "You're Captain Kincaid, right? Fort Liberty Military Police." I nodded once. He sighed as if that confirmed something he already suspected. "You know the process then. Statement, witness review, and we'll get you out of here as soon as we can." His tone wasn't hostile. Just tired, the tone of a man who's seen too many families break down over pride. Lorraine's voice still echoed from the body cam playback, sharp and undeniable. "Break her legs clear as sunlight through glass." Brant had replayed it twice for his sergeant, and the second time the room went silent. The other officer looked at me, then at Brant, then muttered, "Yeah, that's not self-defense anymore. That's reaction." Brant corrected him quietly. "It's lawful self-defense." She redirected force. "You saw the angle." That one sentence was the first breath of relief I'd had all night. Still, they had to process the paperwork, and procedures move slower than justice. I sat there for nearly an hour while Brant typed. Through the half-open door, I could hear Lorraine's voice carrying through the lobby, shrill and rehearsed. "She's dangerous, officer. She's violent, unstable. Ask her father." My father's deeper voice followed, softer but equally weak. "Maybe she snapped. She's under pressure." I closed my eyes. Pressure. That word again. As if serving my country made me fragile, not forged. When Brant returned, he offered a paper cup of water. "Captain, you have the right to remain silent. You probably know this better than I do. You can contact legal representation through the base." I gave a nod. "JAG will be notified," I said quietly. He tilted his head. "You want to make a statement?" "Not without counsel," I replied. It wasn't defiance. It was discipline. He respected that. An older sergeant entered the room, gray mustache, wedding ring glinting. "We've reviewed the footage. You're cleared for release. It's pretty clear who started it." He looked down at his notes, then added, "Your stepmother's already calling half the county. Facebook posts calls to the mayor's office. You might want to brace for that." I allowed myself a half smile. "That sounds like Lorraine. She said you threw her daughter across the room." I met his eyes. "Do I look capable of throwing a grown woman across a table?" He chuckled. "No, ma'am, you look like you redirected a bad decision." They handed me back my belongings, my ID, my phone, the small camera module that had recorded everything. "Keep that safe," Brant said. "It might save you twice." Outside, the night air was colder, sharper. The flashing lights were gone, replaced by the steady glow of porch lamps and the low hum of quiet gossip. Neighbors peeked through curtains. Fayetteville nights had a way of carrying whispers like wind through pine needles. I called a rideshare back to the small rental near downtown. Evelyn was waiting on the porch, wrapped in my old field jacket. Her eyes were swollen but steady. "Did they charge you?" she asked. "No," I said, unlocking the door. "But Lorraine will." Inside, the house smelled of lavender and dish soap. She poured tea into mismatched mugs, the same ones she'd kept since before the divorce. "Your father didn't say a word," she murmured, not even when she screamed at him to choose. I looked down at the tea swirling in the cup. He already chose years ago. My phone buzzed on the counter, notifications from Facebook and local news groups, Lorraine's name in every post. Photos of police cars outside the house, comments flooding in, "Crazy MP attacks sister." Family drama turned violent. "She's a danger to society." Lorraine moved faster than the truth ever could. I powered the phone off. "They'll believe her for now," I said. "But the footage doesn't lie." Evelyn's voice trembled. "Do they know about the camera?" "They will," I said, "tomorrow." The next morning, I woke early and reported to Fort Liberty. Even on leave, I followed routine dress blues, pressed boots, polished posture unbroken. In the mirror, the bruised shadow near my temple caught the light a mark from the chaos. I touched it not with shame, but with certainty. At the gate, Brant's cruiser pulled up beside my car. He rolled down the window, offering a small nod. "Just so you know, he said our report notes self-defense. You'll probably get calls from internal review, but you're good." I thanked him. He hesitated, then added, "For what it's worth, my sister's MP, too. You folks handle yourselves better than most civilians I've met." When I entered the base, Lieutenant Colonel Whitaker was waiting. "Captain Kincaid," he said in that measured voice officers use when they're balancing empathy and protocol. "I've read the preliminary report. Off-duty incident civilian jurisdiction. I'll need your written account by 1600 hours. "Yes, sir." He studied me. "You all right?" "Yes, sir." He nodded slowly. "Good. Keep your head down. Let the process work. And Captain, don't engage on social media. The minute you explain yourself to the crowd, you lose control of the narrative." That sentence lingered long after I left his office. Lorraine's narrative was already spreading her version of events polished with pity and power. But what she didn't realize was that my patience was not weakness. It was strategy. That night, scrolling through a flood of comments accusing me of abuse and entitlement, I thought of something my first drill sergeant used to say. When people throw dirt at you, stand still long enough and they bury themselves. I was ready to let her dig. The first time I realized the house no longer felt like home, I was 15. My father had remarried 6 months earlier, and every picture of my mother had been moved from the living room to a storage box labeled miscellaneous. Lorraine moved in with her perfume bottles, her routines, and her daughter Chloe, who at the time was 8 and already understood that crying got her what she wanted. The house changed its rhythm. My father's laughter became shorter, his patience thinner. Lorraine managed everything: the bills, the groceries, even the thermostat. She said numbers like budget and responsibility, but somehow her manicure never chipped and Chloe's dance lessons never got canceled. At first, I tried to keep the peace. I cleaned my own room, did my schoolwork, and stayed out of the way. But Lorraine didn't want peace. She wanted control disguised as order. "Harper, could you fold Chloe's laundry?" "She's too young. Harper, don't take the car. Your stepfather and I might need it." "Harper, you should spend less time with those ROTC boys. It's not feminine." Every command came wrapped in a smile sharp enough to cut. My father rarely contradicted her. When I complained, he'd say, "She's trying to bring structure. Give her a chance." So I did, until I realized structure meant obedience. The breaking point came one August afternoon. I had worked double shifts at the diner to save for a used car. Lorraine found the envelope of cash I'd hidden in my desk and handed it to my father. "She shouldn't keep that kind of money in the house," she said. "It's unsafe." My father nodded and deposited it into his account for safekeeping. When I asked about it a month later, he said, "We used part of it to pay Chloe's dental bill." Family helps family. That night, I filled out my Army enlistment paperwork online. I was 17. I didn't tell anyone until the day a recruiter came to the house in uniform. Lorraine greeted him first. "She's still a child," she said. The recruiter smiled politely. 18 in 3 months, ma'am. She's got a plan." I'll never forget the look she gave me, half disbelief, half insult, like I was breaking some unspoken rule of her kingdom. My father didn't stop me. He said, "If this is what you want, do it right. Don't come back halfway." I didn't. Basic training was brutal and liberating. For the first time, orders made sense. They had purpose. Discipline wasn't punishment, it was freedom. I sent my first paycheck to my mother, who was living quietly in Raleigh, by then still struggling to pay rent after the divorce. Lorraine had convinced my father that Evelyn didn't deserve alimony because she left the marriage first. Over the years, letters from home became fewer. Lorraine sent a Christmas card, once a photo of Chloe at her sweet 16, smiling in a brand new car. The caption said, "Proud parents." No mention of me. I returned for a visit when I was 24, freshly promoted to Sergeant Proud and naive enough to believe time might have softened them. The moment I walked in, I noticed the changes: new paint, new furniture, family portraits that didn't include me. Lorraine greeted me at the door with a hug too long and too staged. "Look at you. So grown up, so serious. You must think we're boring now." Chloe came down the stairs in designer jeans, rolling her eyes. "You really carry handcuffs all the time?" she asked. "Sometimes," I said. "Depends on who's acting up." She didn't laugh. Dinner that night felt like a performance. Lorraine spoke about investment portfolios. My father boasted about Chloe's scholarship offers. I told them I'd been stationed in Germany working security logistics for NATO exercises. Lorraine nodded uninterested. "Sounds dangerous," she said. "Don't they make you carry guns?" "Yes," I said, "but I prefer paperwork to bullets." "Good," she replied. "No one wants a woman with calloused hands." My father laughed softly, as if to ease the sting. I smiled back, but something inside me locked shut. Before leaving the next morning, I stopped by his office to say goodbye. Papers covered the desk, and a new brass nameplate read Richard Kincaid and Associates, Financial Planning. He looked older, but not unhappier. "You've done well, Harper," he said. "Lorraine's proud of how disciplined you are." I noticed a thick file folder labeled Property Reassignment, Kincaid Residence. When I asked what it was, he said, "Oh, just paperwork. Lorraine handles the house now. It's easier that way. It's under her name," I asked. "Joint," he corrected. "For convenience." I said nothing, but inside, something cold formed a truth I didn't want to admit. The house I had scrubbed floors in, cried in, dreamed of escaping from it wasn't ours anymore. It was hers. That day, driving back to Fort Bragg, I made a silent vow. I would never depend on anyone who could use love as leverage. Over the next few years, I climbed ranks. Promotions came with sacrifice, late nights, distant relationships, but I built something that no one could sign away. I sent money to Evelyn regularly, helped her buy a small condo in Fayetteville. She never complained, but I could tell she missed my father. The old man who used to fix radios with me was buried somewhere under Lorraine's approval. Sometimes I wondered if he even noticed the change. When I got my commission as a captain at 29, I received a congratulatory card from him. The handwriting wasn't his. Lorraine had signed both names. The message read, "Proud of you, sweetie. Don't forget where you came from." I had, deliberately. The years rolled forward, and with them came distance, but not peace. My job taught me how to read patterns, financial abuse, coercive control, the way one person can drain another's independence while pretending it's help. When Evelyn called me in 2024, voice shaking, saying Lorraine had forced her to sign property papers she didn't understand, everything snapped into focus. I knew exactly what had happened because I had lived it once. That was the day I packed my duffel, signed my leave papers, and drove back to Fayetteville. I wasn't returning as the scared teenager who had left. I was coming home as Captain Harper Kincaid Military Police. And this time, I was bringing the truth with me. Mornings at Fort Liberty always began with the same rhythm boots, striking pavement cadence, echoing through the humid North Carolina air. For most soldiers, it was noise. For me, it was order, the sound of lives moving in one direction with purpose. I'd been an MP captain for almost 3 years, long enough to know that calm wasn't something you found. It was something you built inside the chaos. That week had been heavy. 2 domestic disturbance calls off Post 1 involving a young private whose wife had called us at 0200, crying about bruises she didn't want documented. I handled the paperwork myself, making sure her statement was clear enough to protect her, but gentle enough that she wouldn't withdraw it later. That's what people didn't understand about being military police. We weren't just enforcers. We were translators of pain, turning fear into evidence that the system could use. Lieutenant Colonel Whitaker called me into his office right after morning formation. He was a lean man in his late 40s, the kind whose voice carried authority without ever needing to rise. "Captain Kincaid," he said, gesturing toward a chair. "Good work on the Darby case. Command is satisfied with how you de-escalated the scene. You used procedure, not power." "Thank you, sir," I said. He nodded, folding his hands. "That's what professionalism under pressure means. You understand that better than most." I wanted to thank him, but part of me bristled, because outside these gates I was being called the opposite of professional. The local news was still running Lorraine's version of events, calling me the aggressive stepdaughter. The station had released no footage yet. It was evidence, but the rumor was enough. Whitaker didn't mention it directly, but he knew. "Take some time this weekend, Captain," he said. "We both know Fayetteville isn't a small town. People talk. Don't let it get under your skin." Yes, sir. Back in the company area, Sergeant First Class Delgado caught up with me. Ma'am, the rookies are asking if you'll run that de-escalation workshop again, he said. They liked the part about breathing before speaking. I almost laughed. They just liked that I let them talk back without writing them up. He grinned. Maybe. But they listened to you. You've been through more than most. I knew what he meant. Everyone on post had heard whispers about the off-duty incident. Soldiers respected discipline, but they also smelled scandal like blood and water. I didn't mind. Let them wonder. It kept them alert. That afternoon, I ran the workshop again. 10 junior MPs in a circle notebooks opened the air thick with focus. Professionalism under pressure. I began writing the words on the whiteboard. You will face situations that hit closer than a bullet ever could. Family betrayal lies. Your first job is not to react. Your first job is to observe. One private raised his hand. Ma'am, what if the person pushing you is family? How do you stay professional then? I looked at him for a moment too long, then answered evenly. You remember that self-control isn't weakness. It's strength measured in silence. They wrote that down. After the session, Delgado lingered. Ma'am, he said quietly, you ever wish you weren't so good at staying calm? I smiled, tired. Every day, Sergeant, but it's why I'm still standing. When the duty day ended, I walked along the motor pool fence line. The sun hung low red over the tree line, coating the base in copper light. Soldiers passed by laughing, heading to the PX or the gym. My life was built on predictability checklists, call logs, procedures. And yet, the world outside those gates was unraveling one rumor at a time. I stopped near the flagpole, listening to the last call of retreat echo across the post. The flag descended slowly, perfectly folded by 2 soldiers barely 20 years old. That kind of precision still moved me. It was everything my childhood lacked. I thought about Lorraine's dining room, the screaming, the broken glass, and how different it felt from this place. Here, rules meant safety. Out there, rules were weapons. I went to the range that evening. My hands were steady as I loaded each round. Every pull of the trigger was deliberate, controlled. The target sheet tore in perfect clusters. Accuracy was my meditation. You could measure control in millimeters. When I locked the weapon and signed the log, Sergeant Major Torres from headquarters approached. Heard you handled another messy domestic off-post, he said. Good instincts. Habit, sir, I replied. He studied me. Habit can keep you alive. It can also keep you lonely. I didn't respond. He was right, but I wasn't ready to admit it. Back at quarters, I made dinner simple, boiled pasta, canned sauce, black coffee. My phone buzzed again with messages from Evelyn Lorraine's telling everyone you broke Chloe's arm. She says you used military training on her. I replied, don't engage, let her talk. The truth's on video. There was a pause, then she wrote, you sound like your commanding officer. I smiled faintly. Maybe that wasn't a bad thing. Before bed, I opened my laptop and began drafting a memo for Whitaker, my report on the Darby case. But my mind drifted to the one person who never filed a report for what she'd done Lorraine. She lived her life in gray areas, always just within the law, always one signature ahead. I promised myself something as I stared at the blinking cursor. If she wanted to play with paperwork, she was about to meet someone who read every line. The next morning, I was up at 0500. Formation, inspection routine. My soldiers looked to me for steadiness, and I gave it. Inside, though, the quiet was cracking. Every salute reminded me that I could command an entire platoon, but not my own father's respect. When Whitaker stopped by the office later, he said, Captain, I'll be forwarding you for commendation on the Darby resolution. Headquarters wants to highlight nonviolent responses. It's good press. Thank you, sir. He studied me, then added, you ever notice how the world outside these fences has a way of testing who we are inside them? Every time I go home, sir. He gave a slow nod. Keep your armor polished, Captain, not just the metal kind. That night, as the barracks lights dimmed and the base fell into the quiet rhythm of sleep, I stood by the window of my quarters. Beyond the fence line lay Fayetteville, where my family's lies were still growing roots. Here within the fences order reigned, but I knew I couldn't live inside walls forever. The call came just after dawn on a Thursday in early May. I had been up since 0500, finishing the last of my incident reports before the weekend. My phone buzzed across the desk, the caller ID flashing Mom. I answered with a smile I hadn't realized I was forcing. "Morning, Mom." Her voice trembled on the other end. "Harper, I need your help." Those words turned my spine to ice. My mother was the kind of woman who apologized for needing a ride to the doctor, not someone who asked for help outright. I closed the office door, lowering my tone. "What happened? Lorraine came by yesterday," she said, voice breaking. "She said your father was finalizing the estate. She needed my signature for the transfer just to update records." "Estate," I repeated. "Mom, what estate?" "The house," she whispered. "The one on Ridgeway." I froze. The Ridgeway house was hers, her inheritance from my grandparents, the one thing Lorraine had never managed to touch. I'd paid half the property tax for 3 years to help her keep it. "You didn't sign anything, did you?" I asked. She hesitated too long. "She wouldn't leave until I did." "Mom," I said carefully, "did anyone witness it? Just a notary she brought." "He said it was routine." She smiled the whole time. "Harper, I thought it was just updating records." I gripped the edge of the desk so hard my knuckles turned white. "Do you have a copy? No." She said she'd send one later. Your father called afterward. He said it was better this way to simplify ownership. I took a slow breath. The Army teaches you that panic solves nothing. "Okay, Mom, listen to me. Don't sign anything else, don't talk to her again, and don't leave the house until I get there." "Harper, you can't just, I'm coming home." After I hung up, I sat for a long minute staring at the framed oath on the wall. Serve with honor, protect with integrity. The words felt personal now. I pulled up my leave form on the computer. Emergency family circumstances. 5 days. I typed the justification, potential property fraud involving immediate relative. Then I walked the form straight to Lieutenant Colonel Whitaker's office. He looked up from his paperwork as I entered. "Captain Kincaid, what's wrong?" "Family issues, sir," I said. "Serious one. I need 5 days of emergency leave." He studied me for a moment. "This about that off-duty incident last month?" "Indirectly," I replied. "It's escalated. There may be a financial element now." He leaned back, exhaling. "You've had a rough season, Captain." "Yes, sir," I said, "but I'd rather handle this before it becomes another headline." He signed without hesitation. "Take the time you need. Keep me updated. And Kincaid, document everything. Family or not, paper keeps the world honest." I nodded. "Yes, sir." Within 2 hours, I was on the road to Fayetteville. The drive down Highway 87 felt endless, the trees flashing past like static. My mother's neighborhood hadn't changed, the same cracked sidewalks, the same rows of azaleas she tended with old coffee grounds and stubborn pride. When I pulled into her driveway, she was waiting on the porch in her robe, clutching a folder. "It came this morning," she said, holding out an envelope. Lorraine dropped it off herself. Said everything was finalized. I took the papers inside, laying them flat on the table. The first page bore the notary seal. The document title read, "Quitclaim Deed, Ridgeway Residence." My stomach twisted. The grantee listed was Lorraine Kincaid, sole proprietor. "She forged this," I said, "or tricked you into it. Either way, it's illegal." Mom's hands shook. "Your father called again. He said not to make a fuss, that Lorraine's handling everything." "He's not thinking straight," I said. "This isn't simplification, it's theft." I spent the next hour scanning the document, noting every irregularity, the rushed handwriting, the misaligned date, the notary's signature smudged. I took photos, uploaded them to a secure drive. Then I called Major Ava Klein, my friend at JAG. She answered on the second ring. "Kincaid, what's up? I need your eyes on something civilian side," I said. "Possible real estate fraud. My mother's signature coerced under duress." She whistled softly. "Send me the copy. If it's a quitclaim deed and she wasn't advised, it's contestable. You might have a criminal angle if the notary's complicit." "I'll send it in an hour," I said. "You back in Fayetteville? Just arrived." "Then be careful," she said. "People like that don't commit fraud once they practice it." After the call, Mom sat silently across the table staring at the window. "I should have known better," she murmured. She's been circling me for years like she was waiting. I poured her tea the same ritual as when I was a kid after bad days. You didn't do anything wrong, Mom. You trusted your ex-husband's wife. That's not a crime. What she did is... She gave a shaky laugh. You sound like a lawyer. No, I said just someone who's tired of watching her get away with it. By nightfall, I had organized every file into labeled folders, deed copy signatures, witness statement, military habit, order before emotion. Around 8, my father called. The screen flashed, Dad, and my chest tightened. I answered anyway. Harper, your mother's overreacting, he began immediately. Lorraine was just trying to straighten out the title. The taxes were getting complicated. Dad, I said, keeping my tone level. Mom didn't understand what she signed. That makes it coercion. It's not coercion if she agreed, he said sharply. You're blowing this out of proportion. Lorraine's worked hard to keep this family stable while you've been off playing soldier. The insult rolled off me like armor. I'm not playing anything. I enforce law for a living, and what you just described is a felony. He hesitated. Don't start this again. You always make her out to be the villain. Then she should stop auditioning for the role, I said quietly. He hung up without another word. Mom reached over, resting her hand on mine. He won't see it, Harper. Not until she takes everything. Then we'll stop her before that happens, I said. That night, I emailed every document to Major Klein along with a note. Preliminary evidence suggests fraud, requesting civilian legal path. Then I sat by the window watching the streetlights flicker on Ridgeway Avenue. Somewhere across town, Lorraine was probably celebrating her newest victory sipping wine over a stolen deed. But she'd made one mistake she never calculated for. She had forced a soldier to fight a paper war. And in my world, paper always left a trail. The drive to my father's house took less than 20 minutes, but it felt like crossing decades. Fayetteville's spring air hung heavy with humidity, the kind that made every thought move slower. The closer I got to the cul-de-sac, the tighter my grip on the wheel became. I hadn't set foot in that house in almost 7 years, not since the last awkward dinner where Lorraine toasted to family unity while I counted down the seconds until I could leave. The porch light was already on, though it was only late afternoon. Cars lined the street, Mercedes Lexus 1 BMW I recognized as Chloe's from social media. My mother wasn't there, but of course Lorraine had gathered her loyal crowd. I parked at the curb, straightened my uniform jacket, and walked up the path. Through the open door, I could hear laughter, the performative kind, too loud, too perfect. Inside the living room looked like a showroom, white couches, gold accents, no trace of the home I grew up in. A banner hung across the wall, Family Appreciation Dinner. Lorraine turned as I stepped inside, a crystal glass in hand. She wore a white blouse and pearls like she was auditioning for the role of Southern Grace. Well, if it isn't the captain, she said, voice bright but cold underneath. I didn't know soldiers could just drop by uninvited. I kept my tone neutral. I called. No one answered. Chloe, standing beside her in a tight red dress, smirked. We were busy, Harper. It's a family-only night. I looked around the room, my father by the fireplace, 2 of Lorraine's friends from church, her brother and his wife. Not one person from my mother's side. Seems you've redefined family again, I said quietly. Lorraine raised her glass. Oh, don't be dramatic. We keep soldiers at the gate, not at the table. The line hit like a slap, but I didn't flinch. The room chuckled politely, the way people laugh when they want to stay on the winning side. My father looked uncomfortable but said nothing. I nodded slowly. Right. I wouldn't want to dirty the table with duty. Lorraine's smile tightened. Still so quick with your comebacks. You could have been a lawyer instead of, what is it you do? Arresting drunk privates. Enforcing law, ma'am, I said evenly. It's what keeps people safe. Her eyes glittered. Including your temper, I hope. Chloe laughed too loudly, filling her glass again. My father stepped forward finally. Let's keep this civil. We're all adults here, are we? I asked, keeping my tone level. Because Mom called this morning, said Lorraine had her sign a deed transfer under false pretenses. The laughter stopped cold. Lorraine's face froze for half a second before her mask returned. Your mother is confused. She's always been delicate. She's not confused, I said. She's scared, and for good reason. Chloe rolled her eyes. Oh my God, you're still obsessed with control. Not everything is a military investigation. I turned to her. Then maybe you shouldn't forge signatures on family property. The sound that followed wasn't laughter, it was the collective intake of breath from everyone watching. Lorraine stepped forward, her heels sharp against the tile. That's enough, Captain. This is not your base. You will not march in here and accuse your family of crimes. Family doesn't steal from family, I said. My father's jaw clenched. Harper, please. Sit down. We'll talk about this later. When after the house is gone, I asked. After Mom's name disappears from every record, Lorraine slammed her glass onto the counter. That woman abandoned this family years ago. Everything we've built since then is ours. Your father has done more for Chloe than your mother ever did for you. You're right, I said softly. He gave her everything he took from me. Chloe's face flushed. You're pathetic, always playing the victim. You think that uniform makes you better than us. No, I said. It reminds me I don't have to prove anything to people who mistake cruelty for power. The silence stretched until Lorraine laughed a brittle cutting sound. Well, this has been charming. Why don't you finish your visit at the curb where you belong? I looked at my father, waiting for him to speak. His eyes dropped to the floor. That was my answer. Fine, I said, my voice steady. Enjoy your party. I turned to leave, but Lorraine couldn't help one last jab. Tell your mother we'll pray for her. And for you when your little army career ends. Maybe then you'll learn humility. I paused at the door. Humility isn't letting people rob you and smile about it. Behind me, Chloe muttered, You should have stayed gone. So should your conscience, I said, without turning back. Then I stepped out into the humid air. The laughter started again the moment the door closed behind me, louder, meaner, like a show restarting after an interruption. I stood in the driveway breathing until the sting in my throat subsided. My phone buzzed with a text, unknown number. Stay out of our business, soldier girl. I didn't reply. I took a photo of the message and sent it straight to myself, then archived it. Paper trail. Always. As I sat in the car, my father came out, his tie loosened, face tired. You can't keep doing this, Harper, he said. You're tearing this family apart. No, I said quietly. I'm the only one trying to hold it together. He sighed. Lorraine's not the enemy. Then you don't know what an enemy looks like. He shook his head and walked back inside, closing the door slowly as if that would soften the sound. It didn't. It slammed like punctuation. I sat there for several minutes staring at the house. The same house where I'd once practiced salutes in the backyard with a stick for a rifle. Now it was just another battlefield one without rank or rules. Before driving off, I took one last look at the lit windows. Lorraine's silhouette moved behind the curtains, a glass raised again like a queen reclaiming her throne. Chloe laughed beside her. My father stood between them, the outline of a man who'd surrendered without realizing it. I whispered to the empty car, Enjoy your victory. You won't keep it long. The road back to my mother's house was quiet. I kept both hands tight on the wheel, my pulse still pounding. When I reached the Ridgeway driveway, the porch light was still on. Mom was waiting, worry carved deep into her face. How bad was it, she asked. Worse than I thought I said. But they slipped. Lorraine's defensive. She knows she's exposed. You're not going to fight her directly, are you? No, I said, forcing calm. I'm going to do what she never expects. I'm going to stay calm and let the truth bury her. Mom looked at me for a long time, her eyes sad but proud. You sound just like your father used to. I glanced toward the dark window and said, Then I hope he's still listening. By the time I arrived for the so-called reconciliation dinner, I already knew it was a setup. Lorraine's text had been sugar sweet. Just family. Let's make peace. That alone was suspicious enough. Still, Mom insisted I go believing maybe Dad was finally ready to talk. She was wrong. The dining room looked like a magazine spread, candles, polished silverware, the same white and gold perfection that screamed control. Lorraine sat at the head of the table, her pearls catching the light like small traps. Chloe sat to her right, swirling wine, though she'd clearly already had too much. Dad occupied the other end, silent eyes red like he'd been drinking too. The rest of the table was filled with Lorraine's friends, not a single person from my side of the family. I kept my composure, placing my phone face down beside my plate, recording audio as precaution. Military instinct, always document. Lorraine started with her trademark charm. "We wanted to have you back, Harper," she said sweetly, "so we could all move on. You've caused a lot of tension lately. I'm sorry," I said evenly, "if my mother's stolen property has been inconvenient for your schedule." A few heads turned. Lorraine's smile didn't move. "You always did have a sharp tongue," Chloe snorted. "It's the only sharp thing about her." I ignored it, focusing on my water glass. I'd learned long ago that silence unsettled bullies more than shouting ever could. But Chloe was drunk enough to mistake quiet for weakness. "You know," she continued, her words slurring slightly, "Dad says you used to beg for his attention when you were little. Guess you still can't stand not being the favorite." I looked at my father. His gaze was fixed on his plate. "Chloe," I said, calm but clear, "you've had enough." "Oh, please," she sneered. "Don't pull that officer tone with me. You're not on base now. You can't order anyone around." Lorraine chuckled, tapping her fork against her glass. "Let her speak, dear. It's rare to see her so honest." Chloe's voice rose, the alcohol pouring through every syllable. "Your mother's pathetic Harper. Always has been. Everyone knows she chased Dad for money, then got bitter when he found someone better. At least Lorraine made something of this family." I stood up the chair, scraping lightly against the hardwood. "Don't talk about my mother." Or what, Chloe slurred, rising too. "You'll arrest me. Hit me. That's what you did last time, right?" Lorraine's face turned smug. "Careful, Chloe. Our soldier here has a habit of violence when she's challenged." I took a slow breath, steady and low. "I'm not here to fight." "Then sit down," Lorraine said sharply. "You're not in command here." "No," I replied, "but I don't take orders from people who steal from widows." The room went silent. Lorraine's jaw flexed. Then she slammed her hand on the table and shouted, "Break her legs!" For a split-second time, froze. Chloe blinked confused until Lorraine hissed, "Do it!" Chloe's chair toppled as she lunged across the table, grabbing for me with an uncoordinated swing. My training kicked in before thought could catch up. I stepped aside, caught her wrist, and redirected her momentum just enough to keep her from hurting either of us. Her heel slipped on the polished floor, and she went down hard, crashing into the edge of the table. The sound of impact echoed like a gunshot. Then came the screams. "Oh my God," one of Lorraine's friends shrieked. "She's hurt!" Chloe lay on the floor, clutching her head, moaning. Blood wasn't visible, but the bruise forming at her temple was immediate. I dropped to a knee instinctively to check her breathing stable, shallow, stunned. "Call an ambulance," I said firmly. "Now!" Lorraine was already performing for her audience. "You attacked her." "You animal, I told you she was unstable. She attacked me," I said, voice steady but clipped. "You gave the order. You're insane," Lorraine screamed, pointing wildly at me. "You just assaulted your own sister." "Half-sister," I corrected. "And no, I used minimal force." "There are witnesses. Witnesses who saw you throw her," she spat. "You're finished, Harper. The Army will hear about this." My father knelt beside Chloe, shaking her shoulder. "Call 911, he barked. Now I stood back, giving them space, my heart pounding. It wasn't guilt, it was fury, barely held in check. I'd been trained to face armed suspects, domestic abusers, drunk privates, but nothing prepared me for the moment. Your own family made you the villain. Within minutes, sirens wailed in the distance. Blue and red lights flashed through the window. Lorraine straightened her blouse, crocodile tears already glistening. "You're done," she whispered to me. "You'll lose your badge, your rank, everything. I'll make sure of it." "You just confessed," I murmured. Body cam caught it all. Her face drained of color. "What? What did you say? I never come here unprotected?" The knock on the door was loud, authoritative. Fayetteville PD. "Open up," Lorraine rushed to the door, clutching her pearls. "Officer, thank God you're here. My stepdaughter just attacked her sister." Officer Brandt stepped inside, the same one who'd processed me weeks earlier. His eyes flicked to me, then the table, then Chloe on the floor. Captain Kincaid, he said cautiously. We meet again. Officer, I said. There's been an incident. Civilian aggression followed by defensive restraint. Lorraine pointed at me. She's lying, ma'am, he said calmly. Let's get statements one at a time. He gestured to another officer to check on Chloe. Lorraine's voice trembled theatrically. She hates us. She's been harassing us ever since she lost control of her father. Lorraine? I said quietly. I have audio. You told her to break my legs. Brant raised an eyebrow. That true, ma'am? What? Of course not, she stammered. Then you won't mind if I listen to the recording later, he said evenly. Captain, please step outside. I followed him to the porch. The air outside felt like freedom laced with gasoline. The sirens still echoed faintly as another ambulance pulled up. You okay, Brant? Asked once we were out of earshot. Fine. She's conscious, no bleeding, just shock. You handled it by the book again, he said. But you know how this looks. We'll need statements and I'll have to notify command. Understood. He hesitated. You're not safe in that house. She's escalating. I know, I said, but now she's on record. Back inside, Lorraine's voice carried over the hum of radios and murmurs. See? Even the police know she's dangerous. Brant ignored her, directing EMTs toward Chloe. As they lifted her onto a stretcher, Chloe's dazed eyes found mine. For the first time, she looked small, scared, not cruel. I nodded once, not out of apology, but acknowledgement. Lorraine rounded on me again. You'll regret this, she hissed. You think your uniform makes you untouchable. You're just a girl who couldn't be loved. I didn't answer. I simply watched as the ambulance doors closed. The neighbors had gathered outside, whispering, watching the lights flicker off the manicured lawns. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled across the Carolina sky. Brant met my eyes as he walked back. Captain, you're clear for now. But they'll spin this. Get ready. I nodded, my voice low but steady. Let them. Truth has a longer fuse. Behind me, Lorraine's wailing turned to muffled rage. She didn't realize it yet, but this was the sound of her control slipping. And as the last flash of blue light disappeared down the road, I whispered to myself the line that had carried me through combat and chaos alike. Professionalism under pressure. The flashing lights painted the living room walls red and blue, turning every polished surface into a mirror of chaos. Lorraine clutched her pearls like she was auditioning for grief, tears rolling perfectly down her foundationed cheeks. Chloe was already in the ambulance outside, dazed but stable, the paramedics moving efficiently under the night drizzle. I stood beside Officer Brant, hands visible, posture straight, every motion deliberate, professional. Years of MP training had taught me that civilians respected calm even when they hated you for it. Let's start from the top, Brant said evenly, notebook in hand. Your version first. Captain. I nodded. I arrived for a family dinner. Verbal provocation escalated. Lorraine Kincaid. My stepmother issued a direct verbal command to her daughter Chloe to break my legs. Chloe then attempted physical aggression. I deflected using an MP standard joint control maneuver, non-lethal minimal force. The fall resulted from her own momentum. He jotted it down, expression unreadable. You got this on record. I reached into my uniform jacket slowly and produced the small black device. Personal body cam. Off-duty recording, standard whenever I'm involved in potential civilian altercations. He took it carefully, turning it over in his hand. You always carry this? After last month, I said quietly. I learned to. Lorraine lunged forward, voice shrill. She's dangerous. You can't believe her. She's a trained killer pretending to be calm. Look at what she did to my daughter Brant, didn't even look up. Ma'am, I'll hear your statement next. She's manipulating you, Lorraine cried. She lies like her mother. She's obsessed with ruining us. Ma'am, he repeated, voice firmer. Step back and let me do my job. Lorraine froze, not used to being told no. Behind her, one of her friends muttered, Maybe we should leave Lorraine. I kept my eyes on Brant. I invoked the Stand Your Ground statute under North Carolina law, I said. Section 14 to 51.3, the use of reasonable force to prevent imminent bodily harm. That got his attention. He flipped to a fresh page. You familiar with the legal language, Captain? Yes, sir, I replied. It's drilled into us. We act to defend, not to punish. He smiled slightly. Looks like she just stood her ground. Lorraine gasped, pointing again. You can't be serious. That's self-defense. She's a soldier. Exactly, he said, which means she understands proportionality. And from what I've seen tonight, you don't. She sputtered, the performance faltering. You're all in on it together. The army protects its own. Ma'am, he said, closing his notebook, if that were true, you wouldn't have called us. I suppressed the urge to smirk. Brant gestured toward the hallway. Let's review the footage. We sat at the dining table while he connected my body cam to his tablet. Lorraine hovered behind him like a vulture waiting for a miracle. The playback started her voice crystal clear. Break her legs. The room in the video gasped again, same as before. The camera caught everything, the command, the lunge, the takedown, and me kneeling to check Chloe's pulse immediately after. No aggression, no follow-through, just control. When it ended, Brant looked up slowly. That's pretty definitive. Lorraine's lips parted, no sound coming out. Her eyes darted toward the watching neighbors at the doorway. For once, she had no script. Brant stood pocketing his tablet. Captain Kincaid, you're clear for now. We'll file this as defensive use of force. You'll still need to provide a statement for the record. Understood, I said. I'll submit a written report through the proper channels. Lorraine staggered toward him, voice breaking into hysteria. You can't just let her walk. She's a danger to everyone. She belongs behind bars. Brant turned calmly. Ma'am, I've seen a lot of domestic calls in this town. What I saw tonight was one sober person surrounded by drunk ones. One of Lorraine's guests laughed nervously. She spun on him, shrieking, Don't you dare! The sound of her voice cracked through the humid air like glass. My father finally spoke, his tone weary. Lorraine, enough. The officer's seen the footage. Let it go. You're defending her now, she demanded. After what she's done to your daughter, Chloe's alive, he said softly. That's more than I can say if she'd actually hit Harper first. Lorraine's expression flickered between outrage and fear. You're all turning on me, she whispered. All of you. No, I said quietly. You turned on yourself the moment you gave that order. Brant closed his notebook. Captain, I'll need you to sign this incident acknowledgement. It confirms you were cooperative and provided evidence voluntarily. Of course, I said, signing neatly at the bottom. As he gathered his things, Lorraine's tears shifted to venom. You think this makes you righteous, don't you? Everyone will still know what you are, a violent woman hiding behind a badge. I met her gaze evenly. No, ma'am. I'm someone who refuses to let violence win. She didn't respond, just glared as the officers packed up. When Brant stepped outside, I followed him into the humid night. The ambulance lights were fading down, the street sirens distant now. He leaned against his cruiser, watching the neighbors disperse. You handled that by the book, Captain. Most people would have lost control. Training, I said simply. Yeah, but training doesn't stop emotion, he replied. You did good. Just keep your reports clean and your lawyer close. Families like that, when they can't win with power, they go after reputation. They already have, I said. It's been online for weeks. He sighed. Then get ready for round 2. I tilted my head. You sound like you've seen this before. Every Thanksgiving, he said dryly. Then his tone softened. You ever need a contact for restraining orders or property disputes, I know people in the county clerk's office who actually care. I might take you up on that. He nodded, climbing into his cruiser. And Captain, for what it's worth, you didn't overreact. You stood your ground. Don't let them rewrite it. I watched the car pull away, its taillights vanishing around the bend. The quiet that followed was thick and unsettling. I could hear Lorraine pacing inside, shouting at my father, the faint crash of glass. I didn't go back in. Instead, I walked down the path to my car, my boots crunching softly on the gravel. As I reached the door, my phone buzzed an email from the Fayetteville PD. Incident acknowledgement form attached for your records. Even bureaucracy had a heartbeat tonight. I saved it to a secure folder, exhaled, and finally let my hands tremble. From the open window behind me, Lorraine's voice tore through the night. She's not family. She's a curse. I didn't look back. Some curses protected themselves. The drive to my mother's house was silent, except for the rain beginning to fall steady and cleansing. Each drop on the windshield felt like punctuation, a period, not a comma. When I parked, Mom was waiting by the door, worry etched into every line of her face. "Are you hurt?" she asked. "No," I said, "but someone else's mask just cracked." She frowned. "What happened?" Lorraine screamed an order. Chloe followed it. And the law saw the truth. Finally, Mom whispered. "Finally, someone saw." I nodded slowly. "One step at a time, Mom. Now we build the rest on record." As I climbed the porch steps, thunder rolled again, deep and distant. It didn't sound threatening this time, more like a drumbeat signaling the beginning of something inevitable. Inside, I locked the door, set my body cam on the counter, and whispered the same line I used to tell recruits before sending them into chaos: document everything. The truth is your weapon. The morning after the incident, my phone began vibrating non-stop before sunrise. Dozens of notifications, most from names I didn't recognize, local Facebook groups, tagged posts, screenshots. I opened one out of reflex and froze. There it was, Lorraine's post, time-stamped at 3:14 a.m. My stepdaughter, a U.S. Army officer, attacked my innocent daughter last night. Please pray for Chloe's recovery. We need justice. The photo beneath it was from the hospital, Chloe on a stretcher, pale and dazed, her arm in a sling. No context, no explanation, just an image designed to damn me. Within an hour, it had over 2,000 shares. Comments poured in. She should be court-martialed. Another power-crazy soldier who thinks the rules don't apply. How can you hit your own sister? I scrolled through, my stomach turning, until I found one name that made me stop Dad. He'd left a single comment. "We're all devastated. Please respect our privacy." It was subtle, but it read like an admission. He hadn't denied a thing. By 07:30, my inbox pinged with a message from Battalion HQ report to Lieutenant Colonel Whitaker's office at 0900. I dressed in full Class B uniform, polished shoes, badge shining. The short drive to Fort Liberty felt longer than any convoy I'd ever led. When I arrived, soldiers were already whispering near the entrance. I caught fragments. "That's her, the stepdaughter thing." "Facebook post." Gossip traveled faster than any official report. I knocked on Whitaker's door at exactly 0859. "Enter," came the voice from inside. He sat behind his desk, expression unreadable, a copy of the Fayetteville Observer open beside his coffee. The headline read, "Army Captain Accused in Family Assault Investigation Pending." He looked up, his tone even but edged. "Captain Kincaid, have a seat." "Yes, sir." I sat back straight, palms flat on my knees. He tapped the paper with one finger. "You want to explain this before command asks me for a statement?" "Yes, sir," I said. The incident was a domestic altercation initiated by my civilian stepfamily. I used minimal self-defense. Fayetteville PD reviewed the footage, confirmed no charges. And yet he said your stepmother's version went viral overnight. "You've become the symbol of military misconduct this week." I kept my composure. "Respectfully, sir, social media isn't a court." "No," he said slowly, "but it's faster than one." The silence hung between us. Outside, I could hear the low hum of the flag being raised on the parade field. Finally, he exhaled. "Here's the problem, Captain. You followed the law. But perception doesn't care about procedure. When civilians see a uniform involved in violence, they see authority turned rogue. Command wants this quiet." I nodded once. "What are my orders, sir?" "Effective immediately. You're placed on administrative leave for 5 duty days," he said. "No contact with media, no statements online. You're not under investigation, but we're avoiding optics." "Avoiding optics." The phrase stung more than I expected. "Yes, sir." "This isn't punishment," he continued. "It's containment. You understand the distinction?" "Perfectly." "Good." He folded his hands. "Do you have any documentation proving your side, body cam footage, civilian police report, and an audio transcript?" I replied. "I can provide copies through official channels." "Do that today," he said. "And Captain, sir, make sure your personal affairs are clean. If there's anything in your family's finances that could be weaponized against you, find it before they do." I met his gaze squarely. "Already working on it." He studied me for a long moment, then his tone softened. You've done excellent work here, Kincaid. Don't let this turn you into someone bitter. The Army needs calm officers, not casualties of public opinion. I stood saluting. Understood, sir. Dismissed. Outside the hallway felt colder than usual. Word had already spread through the company. 2 privates fell silent as I passed. Sergeant Delgado caught up to me near the exit, lowering his voice. Ma'am, it's all over the base Facebook page. People are picking sides. They always do, I said. Just make sure they stick to facts. Some are saying you'll be relieved. Rumors need oxygen to survive, I said quietly. Don't give them any. He nodded, eyes full of the kind of loyalty that comes from seeing someone earn respect under fire. Yes, ma'am. By the time I reached my quarters, there were more messages, emails from local reporters, Army forums, even one from a national veteran network requesting comment. I ignored them all. I wasn't going to argue with the internet. Instead, I opened a blank document on my laptop and began to build what I called the timeline. Every interaction with Lorraine, every text, every document, dates, times, screenshots. Evidence didn't need emotion, it just needed to exist. Around noon, my mother called, voice trembling. It's everywhere, Harper. People from church are calling me asking what you did. Don't answer, I said. Don't defend me. Just tell them the police have the truth. She's destroying you. Then I'll let her dig deeper, I replied. The more she talks, the clearer the pattern. Mom hesitated. You really think people will believe the truth? Eventually, I said, they always do when you show them enough paper. That afternoon, I drove back to the police station. Officer Brandt met me at the front desk. Didn't expect to see you again so soon, Captain, he said. Just securing copies, I replied. Digital and physical. He raised an eyebrow. Your stepmother's making noise online. You saw it. Hard to miss. She's filed a preliminary complaint with the County DA civil assault emotional distress property damage. None of it will stick, but she wants headlines. I almost smiled. She always did love an audience. Don't worry, he said. We'll attach your body cam footage to the complaint file. Anyone reviewing it will see how ridiculous her claim is. Appreciate it. On my way out, he added quietly, You ever think of law school after the Army? You'd make one hell of a litigator. I chuckled. Maybe after this tour of family law. Back at quarters, I logged into Facebook just long enough to see the newest twist. Lorraine had gone live. Her eyes were red mascara-streaked, voice trembling for effect. I never wanted this, she said to her thousands of viewers, but my stepdaughter's violence has left our family broken. Please pray for Chloe. Pray for us. I closed the tab before my blood pressure spiked. Manipulators always used faith when they ran out of facts. At sunset, I sat outside my quarters watching the flag lower to half-mast for a memorial ceremony across post. The wind caught the fabric, snapping it sharply, a sound like defiance itself. My phone buzzed again, this time a text from Whitaker. Command read the file. You're clear. Stay off social media until the noise dies down. I typed back. Copy that, sir. Working on documentation for formal statement. Then I opened a new folder labeled Evidence Phase 2. Inside, I saved everything: screenshots, police reports, timestamps, and one blank document titled Operation Exposure. Because if Lorraine wanted a stage, I was going to give her one big enough for the truth to echo back. As I turned off the lights, my reflection in the window looked almost unfamiliar. Uniform, crisp jaw, tight eyes focused not on revenge, but precision. Tomorrow I'd begin the real work. Quiet, legal, relentless. In my world, reputation could be rebuilt, but not by shouting, by proving. By the time the storm outside cleared, I'd already built an entire case file on my dining table. Every folder was color-coded blue for legal documents, yellow for financial statements, red for evidence directly implicating Lorraine. The military had trained me to trace supply lines under fire, but now I was tracing something far colder, the paper trail of a woman who treated deceit like a career. Mom handed me a shoebox of old records. This is everything from the house bank papers, receipts, taxes. I don't even know what's what anymore. That's okay, I said, flipping open the first file. We'll start simple. Every lie leaves a number. She smiled faintly at that, but stayed quiet, watching me work. Hours passed as I sifted through statements, my eyes moving in disciplined rhythm. On the surface, everything looked ordinary: regular mortgage payments, utility bills, modest savings. But then I found it. A second mortgage account opened 9 months ago, different bank, different account number, the same property address. I compared signatures. Mom's usual signature was delicate right-leaning with a clear loop in the Y of her name. The one on the second mortgage was jagged, uneven, slanted backward, like someone trying to copy confidence without understanding it. I held the pages side by side. Mom, did you ever sign for a second loan? She frowned. No, I only have the one we refinanced 5 years ago. I would never. Harper, how is that possible? Identity fraud, I said softly. Or forced signing. Either way, it's illegal. Her hand went to her mouth. She did this, didn't she? She or your ex-husband, I replied. But Lorraine's handwriting is all over the notary lines. The date stamps are identical to the day she made you sign the update for the deed transfer. I photographed everything, every mismatched signature, every stamped date, and saved them to my encrypted drive. Years in the Army had made me paranoid in the best way. Evidence wasn't evidence until it was duplicated, time-stamped, and stored in 3 separate locations. I called Major Ava Klein at JAG headquarters, the one person I trusted to translate law into clarity. She picked up on the second ring. Harper, I was hoping this was about drinks and not disaster. You'd be disappointed, I said, sending her a PDF of the documents. Take a look. I heard her tapping keys on the other end, then a low whistle. Oh, wow. That's a forged signature if I've ever seen one. Different pin pressure, inconsistent stroke pattern, inconsistent alignment. You can prove it in 30 seconds with a handwriting analyst. What's the civilian route, I asked. I want this airtight before it goes anywhere near the Army's radar. First, she said you'll need to file a notarized affidavit from your mother stating she never authorized that loan. Second, request the lender's copy of the original application under the Fair Credit Reporting Act. They're legally required to provide it. If they refuse, you escalate through the North Carolina Banking Commission. Understood. Third, Ava continued. Get the notary's full name and license number. If that signature doesn't match state registry records, you've got a fraud trail. I scribbled notes as she spoke, each instruction slotting into place like tactical orders. If we prove it's forgery, then it becomes a criminal case: identity theft, mortgage fraud, and elder coercion. Civil courts love those combinations. Good, I said. She's been untouchable for too long. Ava's voice softened. Just don't let it get personal, Harp. You're better than vengeance. I hesitated. This isn't vengeance. It's documentation. She laughed quietly. That's what all of us say before we start enjoying it too much. Keep it clean, keep it legal. After the call, I organized everything into chronological order. 1. Lorraine coerces Mom into signing the deed transfer. 2. Second mortgage surfaces with forged signature dated the same day. 3. Property lien appears a month later. The pattern was surgical. She'd been dismantling my mother's security piece by piece, timing each move to look routine. I drove to the county clerk's office the next morning, uniform neatly pressed, even though it wasn't required. Authority had a way of discouraging resistance. The clerk on duty was a woman in her 60s, glasses perched at the end of her nose. Can I help you, Captain? Yes, ma'am, I said, handing over a request form. I'm looking for property documents tied to this parcel number. I believe there was a second mortgage filed fraudulently. She scanned the form and nodded slowly. We did see a recent activity notice, filed under Lorraine Kincaid. You're listed as an interested party. Indirectly, I said. My mother's the homeowner. I'm assisting her legal representative. The woman lowered her voice. I can print you copies of the filings, but officially I'm not supposed to give commentary. Unofficially, I asked. She glanced around, then leaned closer. Unofficially, I've seen her before. Twice. Always with a different notary. Always rushing. My pulse quickened. You remember the notary's name? First one was Daniels. Second was Myers, I think. He's not local anymore, moved out west. Thank you, I said. That helps more than you know. Back in the car, I called Ava again. We have 2 notaries on record. One's local, one vanished. What next? Track the local one first, she said. Interview as a witness if possible. If they're complicit, it's leverage. If they're not, it's testimony. Copy that. The notary Joseph Daniels operated out of a small insurance office on Ramsey Street. His secretary looked nervous the moment I walked in. "Mr. Daniels isn't in today," she said quickly. "Then you can tell him that Captain Harper Kincaid, U.S. Army Military Police, will be back tomorrow with a subpoena request." She blanched. "I'll tell him you stopped by." I smiled thinly. "I'm sure you will." That night I emailed Ava everything. She replied within minutes. "Good work. Don't confront Lorraine yet. Let the evidence pile higher than her lies." I followed her advice, spending the next 3 days gathering every piece of documentation I could find. Bank transfers, property tax ledgers, public record filings, every paper she thought no one would ever read. On the 4th night, as I sat surrounded by piles of evidence, my mother brought me coffee. "You've been at this non-stop," she said. "You haven't even eaten dinner." "Paper doesn't sleep," I murmured, eyes scanning another page. Then I found it, the final nail. A wire transfer from Lorraine's personal account to a private construction firm dated 1 week after the forged mortgage. Amount $128,000. I looked up at Mom. "She didn't just take your house. She leveraged it to fund a remodel for hers." Her hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God!" I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "This isn't just fraud anymore. It's intent. She used your signature as collateral." Mom's voice trembled. "What happens now?" "Now," I said, closing the folder. "We turn her favorite game into a court record." I emailed Ava again, attaching the transaction data. She responded with 2 words that made my pulse steady. "It's airtight." That night, I sat alone by the window, the moonlight catching the edge of the uniform hanging neatly on the chair. In combat, justice came through force. In this war, it came through ink and signatures, and Lorraine had just signed her own defeat. I found my father at his law office the next morning, a small beige building off Hay Street, with his name still stenciled on the door, Douglas Kincaid, Attorney at Law. I stood there for a long moment, watching the name our name, before pushing the door open. The same receptionist who'd known me since high school blinked when she saw the uniform. "He's with a client," she said, then hesitated. "But I'll tell him you're here." 2 minutes later, he appeared in the doorway of his office, older than I remembered. His once dark hair had gone silver, his frame softer, but his eyes, the careful lawyer eyes, were the same. "Harper," he said, forcing a smile. "I wasn't expecting you." "You never are," I replied, stepping inside. "We need to talk." He gestured to a chair. "What's this about?" I placed the folder on his desk, the one labeled Second Mortgage, Evidence. "You might want to read that before you answer." He opened it reluctantly, flipping through pages, his brow furrowing as the words "forged signature" and "fraudulent deed" surfaced in bold black ink. He didn't deny it, not immediately. He just sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Lorraine handled the paperwork. "That's not an answer," I said quietly. "You're listed as witness on a fraudulent loan. Do you even realize that's a felony? Don't lecture me, Harper. I'm not one of your soldiers." "No," I said. "You're worse. You're my father, and you let someone use your own wife's name to steal from my mother." He stood, his voice rising. "That woman has been manipulating you for years. Lorraine's done more to keep this family afloat than your mother ever did, by stealing from her, by fixing what she broke." He snapped, then stopped, realizing how absurd it sounded. He lowered his voice. "You don't understand what it's like to keep a family running, Harper. You've been gone for over a decade, living in your world of orders and rules. Out here, it's not that simple." I leaned forward. "It's exactly that simple when the law is involved." He looked away, jaw tight. "You always did love rules more than people." "No," I said. "I just stopped confusing silence with peace." The words hung heavy between us. He sank back into his chair, staring at the folder. "Lorraine said your mother agreed to sign everything, that it was just consolidating assets." "Then Lorraine lied again," I said. "Mom's statement is notarized. She never authorized anything. The notary you used isn't even active in North Carolina anymore." He swallowed hard. "You don't know what you're starting." "I'm not starting anything," I said, standing. "I'm ending it." His voice softened, almost pleading. "Harper, don't go to court. Please, let me fix it quietly." I stared at him for a long moment. You had a decade to fix things quietly. Now we do it legally." I turned and left before he could say another word. Outside, the sunlight hit like interrogation lights. My hands were shaking not from anger, but from the ache of realizing I couldn't save him from himself. By evening, the fallout began. Lorraine must have heard about the visit within the hour because the first text arrived just after sunset. "You think your rank scares me? This is my house." I stared at the screen, the words almost glowing with arrogance. My thumb hovered over the keyboard before I replied with one sentence. "Not for long." Minutes later, another message came through, this time with venom. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. Your father will choose me over you every time." I didn't respond. Instead, I took screenshots of each text, labeled them by timestamp, and uploaded them to the case folder. Emotion had no place in evidence. Still, when I lay down that night, sleep refused to come. The sound of my own pulse filled the room. For years, I'd convinced myself that distance was protection, that by staying away, I'd avoided the rot of this family. But corruption had a way of reaching across miles. Around midnight, I got a call from an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Captain Kincaid!" A familiar voice came through low and mocking. "Recording everything now, are we?" "You should assume so," I said. "Who is this?" "Someone who's done listening to your threats." It was Lorraine. Her voice was unsteady, wine-soaked, but there was something sharp underneath. "You think you can embarrass me in front of my husband? In front of this town? You'll regret this. You already embarrassed yourself," I said evenly. "I'm just letting the paperwork speak." She laughed, a harsh, hollow sound. "You sound just like your mother. Weak. Always hiding behind paperwork while real adults make decisions. Real adults don't forge signatures." "You'll find out soon enough," she said. "You might have your precious law, but I have connections. Fayetteville's smaller than you think. I can make one phone call and you'll be reassigned before the month's over." "Try," I said. "Every threat you make adds to my file." The line went dead. I sat in silence for a long time, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the house. She was bluffing, but she was desperate, and desperation made people reckless. The next morning, I filed a formal harassment report with the Fayetteville PD attaching the text messages and call log. Officer Brandt emailed back an hour later. "Received and logged. Recommend no direct contact until we process restraining order. Keep documenting everything." I smiled grimly. "Already am." At noon, Ava called again. I reviewed the banking documents. "You've got a clear fraud chain, 2 forged signatures, mismatched notary stamps, duplicate dates. You could take this to the DA tomorrow." "Not yet," I said. "I want to give her enough rope to hang herself." Ava exhaled through the phone. "Careful, Harper. You're playing a dangerous game. It's not a game, I said. It's proof." That evening, as I organized the last of the evidence, my father called. His voice was small-tired. "Harper Lorraine's upset. She says you threatened her." I closed my eyes. "She called me drunk last night. She's escalating. You need to stay clear of this. You're turning her into an enemy," he said. "She did that herself." "Please," he said, voice cracking. "Don't do this through court. We can mediate." "Mediation requires honesty, Dad. She doesn't know the word." Silence. Then a long sigh. "You always were your mother's daughter. That's the nicest thing you've said in years." I replied, then hung up. Outside, the wind picked up rustling the trees like whispers of unfinished arguments. I watched the lights in Lorraine's house flicker across town. She was still up, no doubt, pacing, spinning her next lie. But I had something she didn't, time-stamped truth. Before bed, I wrote one final note in my case log. Phase 3 begins tomorrow, exposure. Then I locked the folder, shut down the lights, and stood by the window. The reflection staring back at me wasn't just a soldier anymore. It was something colder, someone who'd learned that justice wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was a quiet woman with a stack of papers and a plan. The ballroom of the downtown Fayetteville Country Club was lit like a scene from a dream, white drapery, champagne flutes, and the soft hum of expensive laughter. Chloe's engagement party was the kind of event Lorraine lived for, curated, photographed, and dripping with performative perfection. I stood at the edge of it all in my uniform, calm and deliberate, my presence alone enough to draw whispers. The last time most of these people had seen me, I'd been the headline of Lorraine's Facebook scandal. Tonight, I wasn't here to defend myself. I was here to deliver proof. The moment I entered, Lorraine froze mid-conversation. Her smile faltered only for a second before she recovered with feigned grace. "Well, if it isn't our decorated guest!" she called out loudly, just enough for everyone to hear. "I'm surprised you had the courage to show your face." "I could say the same," I replied smoothly. Chloe turned from her fiancé, her face painted in polite confusion. "Harper, maybe this isn't the time." "It's the perfect time," I said, setting the black case I carried onto the nearest table. "Families should always celebrate honesty together." Lorraine's tone sharpened. "If this is another one of your little performances, I'll have security escort you out." "You can try," I said, flipping the case open. Inside was a compact projector, the kind used for military briefings. I connected the drive, dimmed the nearby lamp, and let the first document fill the screen. Quitclaim deed, Ridgeway residence. The crowd murmured. Lorraine's jaw tightened. "This I began evenly is the deed my stepmother coerced my mother into signing under false pretenses. The signature was notarized by a man who no longer holds a license in North Carolina. You'll notice the handwriting doesn't match. I confirmed it with 2 independent analysts. The next slide appeared side-by-side signatures, the authentic one and the forgery." Chloe blinked, color draining from her face. "Mom." Lorraine forced a laugh, brittle as glass. "This is absurd. Anyone can fake documents." I clicked again. The second mortgage appeared bank header loan amount, her name, as the grantee. "Then, perhaps you can explain why this second mortgage was filed under your account number and used as collateral for renovations to your home on Cypress Lane." A ripple of gasps swept through the room. Lorraine's friends exchanged nervous looks. One of them whispered, "That's the same address from her permit filing." Lorraine's composure cracked. "You hacked into my accounts." "No," I said. "I subpoenaed the records legally with help from JAG and the County Banking Commission. Everything here came through lawful access." I clicked again. The screen filled with bank transfers wire records showing $128,000 moved from the Ridgeway account to a construction company linked to Lorraine's cousin. "That money wasn't yours," I said. "It belonged to my mother. You took her home equity to remodel your kitchen." The room was silent except for the low hum of the projector. My father stood near the back, his face, pale eyes locked on the screen. He looked older than I'd ever seen him. Lorraine's voice wavered. "Douglas, tell her to stop this madness." He didn't answer. He just kept staring. "You've built an empire of lies, Lorraine." I continued my tone, steady but cold. "And for years you've hidden behind charm, behind church donations, behind the idea that civility equals innocence. But civility doesn't erase crimes." "How dare you lecture me?" she hissed. "You... No." I cut in, my voice sharper now. "You dare forge my mother's name, steal her house, and then act like you're the victim. This," I gestured to the glowing screen, "is your definition of family." The words hung there like a verdict. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the applause began, hesitant at first, then growing. Not thunderous, but real. People clapped, not for me, but for the audacity of truth spoken in a room full of lies. Lorraine stood frozen, trembling, as her friends slowly stepped back from her. Chloe's fiancé whispered something in her ear before walking away toward the exit. The illusion was breaking in real time, the careful world Lorraine had built collapsing under its own weight. My father stepped forward, voice cracking. "Lorraine, is it true?" "You're really going to believe her over me?" She spat, desperate now. "After everything I've done for you, for this family, for yourself," I said quietly. "You did it for yourself." She turned toward me, eyes blazing. "You think you've won?" "This isn't over. You've humiliated me in front of everyone." "No," I said. "You humiliated yourself." "I just turned on the light." I packed up the projector, calm, methodical. Lorraine's voice cracked into sobs as I turned to leave, but no one moved to comfort her. The whispers followed me down the hallway. Did you see the signatures? It was all real. I never liked that woman anyway. Outside, the night air was cool, cleansing. I could still hear muffled chaos behind me. Lorraine shouting, Chloe crying, my father silent. For the first time, the noise wasn't mine to manage. I exhaled slowly, the adrenaline finally catching up. Justice wasn't loud. It was methodical, factual, undeniable. And now it was public. As I reached my car, my phone buzzed a text from Ava. I saw the live feed. You did it clean, Kincaid. Paper always wins. I smiled faintly. Phase 3, complete. The stars above Fayetteville were sharp and bright, almost surgical against the black sky. Somewhere behind me, the club's music had started again, as if pretending nothing had happened. But nothing would ever be the same. I leaned against the car, closing my eyes for one quiet, victorious breath. For the first time in years, I felt the balance tip toward truth. CTA, what would you have done if your own family forged your mother's name? Would you have stayed silent or brought the truth into the light? Monday morning. I walked into the Cumberland County District Attorney's office with the confidence of someone carrying truth in triplicate. The clerk recognized me from the news cycle and didn't ask for small talk. I handed over the thick folder stamped evidence package, Ridgway case. For Assistant D.A. Hughes, I said. It's about the Kincaid mortgage forgery. She nodded. They've been expecting you. 10 minutes later, I was sitting across from Assistant District Attorney Meredith Hughes, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and the calm demeanor of someone used to sorting through chaos. She'd already reviewed the public footage from the engagement party. Captain Kincaid, she said, I have to say your presentation was cinematic. Evidence shouldn't need special effects, I replied. Just exposure. She smiled faintly. You've made my job easier. I've seen enough to justify a preliminary injunction. We'll freeze Lorraine Kincaid's accounts pending full investigation, and the forged mortgage filed under criminal review. If the handwriting analysis confirms your claim, and it will issue a subpoena within 48 hours. I nodded, exhaling slowly. Thank you, ma'am. She leaned forward. You did everything by the book, Captain. That's rare in domestic cases. Most people act on anger. You acted on procedure. Habit, I said. The Army doesn't reward emotion. Maybe it should, she murmured. Emotion built the case. By noon, the injunction order was filed with the county clerk. Every one of Lorraine's accounts, personal and joint, was frozen pending investigation. Within hours, her world of control stopped spinning. That evening, the phone calls began. The first was from my father. What have you done? He demanded, his voice sharp with panic. They froze our accounts. Lorraine can't pay the mortgage, can't access anything. You mean the mortgage she created illegally? I asked. You're destroying your family. I'm protecting my mother, I said. And you, if you'd stop long enough to realize it. You had no right. The DA disagrees. He went quiet, the sound of his breath uneven. They're summoning me to testify. Then tell the truth, I said. It's the easiest story to remember. He hung up without a word. The second call came from Ava that night. They moved fast, she said. I just got confirmation from the state registry. Lorraine's subpoena's been delivered. She's due in court next Friday. And my father also called as witness. Refusal will trigger contempt. You've set off a small earthquake, Harper. Good, I said quietly. About time this town felt one. The next morning, I drove by the Ridgway house. Lorraine's car was gone, but the blinds were drawn tight. 2 days ago, that house represented her triumph. Now, it looked like a fortress under siege. Mom met me at the porch. The news came, she said, holding up the paper. The headline read, Forgery and Fraud Case in Fayetteville, Prominent Family Under Investigation. Beneath it, a photo of me walking out of the courthouse folder in hand. Uniform, crisp expression, unreadable. You didn't tell me they were taking pictures, she said. Didn't know they would, I replied. But maybe it's better this way. She frowned. You really want the world to see all this? The world already saw her version, I said. Now they'll see mine. Over the next few days, Fayetteville buzzed like a hornet's nest. Local talk shows speculated, neighbors whispered, church groups prayed for the family in distress. Everyone had an opinion. Some called me brave, others called me ruthless. Both were true. Chloe stayed silent through it all. She was recovering at home, still bruised, still shaken. I'd sent her a text, "I hope you're healing." No response came, but the message marked its place in my conscience like a clean wound that refused to close. The DA's office worked fast. Within 72 hours, forensic handwriting analysts verified what I already knew. The signatures on the second mortgage and deed transfer were fraudulent. The notary Daniels confessed under questioning that Lorraine had brought the documents already signed, insisting they were routine verifications. He never checked ID. The statement sealed it. Thursday afternoon, I met Hughes again at the courthouse. She spread the finalized report across the desk. "We'll move forward with charges under North Carolina statutes 14 to 119 and 14 to 120, forgery and obtaining property by false pretenses. Maximum sentence 5 years each count plus restitution." I studied the paperwork. "And my father?" "He's under review for complicity, but if he cooperates, they'll treat him as a material witness, not a co-conspirator." I nodded. "He'll fold. He always does when the law catches up." She paused. "You okay, Captain Fine?" I said. "Just tired." "You've done more in 3 weeks than some lawyers manage in 6 months," she said. "When this goes public, people are going to see what you stood for. Or they'll just see another family that imploded," I said. "But either way, the truth's on record." Outside, reporters were already waiting by the courthouse steps. One called out Captain Kincaid. Any comment on the investigation I stopped, looked straight at the camera, and said, "Only, justice doesn't need commentary." Then I walked away. That night, Lorraine called from an unknown number. Her voice was small, desperate. "You win, Harper. Are you happy now? You humiliated me. My accounts are frozen. I can't even pay my attorney." "You could start by returning what isn't yours," I said. "I'll fight you in court. You think a few papers make you powerful? You're nothing without that uniform." "You're wrong," I said quietly. "The uniform reminds me who I am when people like you try to make me forget." She started to cry, then screamed, "I hope you burn for this before hanging up." I logged the call, date and time, and emailed it straight to Brant's office. He replied 2 minutes later. "Documented. Restraining order will be fast-tracked." The next day, Mom received official notification the house deed had been reinstated under her sole ownership pending trial. She sat at the kitchen table, the document shaking in her hands. "I thought I'd never see this again," she whispered. "You earned it," I said. "You just needed someone to fight in daylight." She looked up at me, tears in her eyes. "You didn't just save my home. You saved my name." I smiled faintly. Names matter, especially when someone tries to steal them. That evening, I watched the 6 o'clock news. The anchor's voice was smooth and personal. In Fayetteville today, local authorities confirmed charges filed in a high-profile forgery and fraud case involving the Kincaid family. Captain Harper Kincaid of Fort Liberty provided key evidence leading to the injunction. No military disciplinary actions are pending. My reflection on the TV screen looked steady, composed, but inside I felt something strange, a quiet mix of vindication and sadness. Justice didn't erase damage, it only named it out loud. Before bed, I checked my email again. A final note from Ava D.A. Hughes requested you testify next week. "Congratulations, Harper. You built a case the right way." I stared at the message for a long time before replying. "Tell her I'll be there, and tell her some wars really can be won without firing a shot." Then I closed the laptop, turned off the light, and let the quiet fill the room. Not the tense kind that used to live here, but the kind that meant something had finally ended. Justice had a strange side effect. It made desperate people reckless. After the injunction froze her accounts and the subpoenas went public, Lorraine shifted tactics from manipulation to menace. It started subtly: slashed mail, heavy footsteps outside my mother's porch at night, the feeling of being watched. Then, the first real message came in the form of a key scratch running the full length of my car door. I found it one morning as I left for the base, a jagged white line glinting against the black paint of my government-issued sedan. I crouched down, examining it closely. The mark was deliberate, steady pressure, single motion, someone who wanted me to see it, not hide it. On the windshield under the wiper sat a note scrawled in messy handwriting. "You should have stayed quiet." I photographed everything damage note tire tracks by the curb and filed a report with the Fayetteville PD. Officer Brandt called that evening. We pulled the street cam. A silver SUV stopped in front of your place at 0200. No license plate visible. My bet it's a rental. Lorraine doesn't have access to her cards anymore, I said, but her friends do. We'll run it, he said. In the meantime, keep your doors locked. And Harper, this is escalation. She's losing control. He was right. 2 nights later, I heard the first knock. It was late, close to midnight. The sound was irregular, not the confident rhythm of a visitor, but a slow, uneven pounding that carried through the walls. Mom stirred in her room down the hall. "Harper, what is it? Stay put," I said, already moving toward the door. I kept my voice low, measured every step deliberate. The porch light was off, but I could see a shadow through the frosted glass, a shape swaying slightly unsteady. "Open up," a voice slurred. "Come on, soldier girl." "Let's talk." I didn't need to hear more to recognize it. "Lorraine." I switched on the light, and there she was, barefoot, hair disheveled, holding a half-empty wine bottle. Her lipstick was smeared, her blouse untucked, her eyes wild. "You really think you can ruin me?" she shouted, slamming the bottle against the doorframe for emphasis. "You think your little courtroom stunt makes you powerful?" I stayed behind the locked door, calm as stone. "You need to leave Lorraine." "This is my house," she screamed. "You and your sick mother stole it from me." "It was never yours," I said quietly. "Go home, before you make things worse." "Worse," she laughed, a broken sound that carried across the yard. "You have no idea how bad I can make it. People talk, Harper. They'll see what you really are, a liar in uniform." I picked up my phone, dialing as I spoke. "This conversation is being recorded and the police are on their way." Her expression shifted just for a second, a flicker of fear before pride buried it. "You wouldn't dare." "Watch me," I said. She hurled the bottle at the ground. It shattered across the porch, spraying glass like shrapnel. "You don't scare me." "None of this scares me," she shrieked. The dispatcher answered. "Fayetteville PD, what's your emergency trespasser at 324 Ridgeway Avenue?" I said steadily. "Female intoxicated known subject under active restraining request. Units en route," the dispatcher replied. "Do not engage." Lorraine heard every word. "You called them again," she snarled. "You want me arrested. You think that'll fix your miserable childhood?" "I think it'll stop you from breaking the law again," I said. She paced, muttering curses until the faint glow of approaching headlights washed over the street. She froze like an animal caught mid-attack. Then, in a slurred burst of panic, she shouted, "You'll regret this, Harper," and stumbled toward her car. Officer Brandt's cruiser pulled up just as she reached it. "Evening, Mrs. Kincaid," he said calmly, stepping out. "Long way from home, aren't we?" "She called you Lorraine," shouted, pointing wildly at me. "She's setting me up, ma'am. You're on private property in violation of an active harassment report." Brandt said, tone still level. "Step away from the vehicle." "I'm not drunk," she protested, wobbling as she tried to stand straighter. "Never said you were," he replied. "But you're trespassing, and you're about 5 seconds from obstruction." "You're all on her side," she cried. "She's manipulating you like everyone else." Brandt sighed, unamused. "Ma'am, please turn around. We're issuing a citation for trespassing and harassment." "You can't do this to me," she screamed, but her resistance was weak. He handed her the pink copy of the citation and gestured toward her car. "You're free to leave after you sign, but if you come back here again, it won't be paperwork. Next time it'll be cuffs." Lorraine snatched the paper, scrawled her signature, and glared at me through the porch light. "You'll pay for this," she whispered. "You'll lose everything." "I've already lost everything that mattered," I said quietly. "There's nothing left you can take." Brandt waited until she drove away, the tires squealing at the corner. Then he turned to me. "You okay, fine," I said. "She's unraveling." "Good thing you didn't open that door," he said. "She's one tantrum away from an assault charge. This citation will hold her for a while. Next step's the restraining order." "I'll file tomorrow," I said. I'll walk it through myself, he replied. You've earned a little peace. After he left, I swept the shattered glass from the porch piece by piece. The act was strangely meditative. Each fragment glittered like a reminder that chaos had consequences. Inside, Mom waited in the hallway clutching her robe. She was here, wasn't she? She won't be again, I said. Not after tonight. I don't understand how she can hate you so much, Mom whispered. People like her don't hate truth, I said softly. They fear it. The next morning, the police report arrived by email. Citation trespass. NCGS 14-159.13. Harassment. NCGS 14277.3A. Defendant Lorraine Kincaid. Officer Brant Fayetteville. PD. I printed it and added it to the folder. The stack of evidence was growing heavier than the past it documented. That evening, Whitaker called from base. Heard you had another run-in off duty, he said. Everything under control. Yes, sir, I said. Local PD handled it professionally. Good, he said. I've read the reports. You've kept your composure through all this, Captain. That's not easy. Control's the only thing I've got left, sir. That's what separates soldiers from survivors, he said quietly. Keep it. When the call ended, I sat on the porch again, this time in silence. The air was cool, the cicadas steady. For the first time, I felt the faintest edge of calm returning. Justice had been methodical, but survival was emotional, quieter, harder. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, a car door slammed. But the sound that lingered most was the memory of Lorraine's voice, raw and cracked, saying, "You'll lose everything." She was wrong. I hadn't lost everything. I'd just stopped pretending things that were broken could be fixed. The courthouse smelled faintly of polish and nerves. The same kind of sterile tension I'd felt in interrogation rooms and military tribunals hung in the air. Only this time the war was domestic mine. The clerk's voice echoed through the marble corridor. Case number 24B-137, State of North Carolina versus Lorraine Kincaid. Mom squeezed my hand as we walked in. She wore a simple navy dress, her hair tied back the lines around her eyes, softened by something I hadn't seen in years, resolve. I sat beside her in my service uniform, ribbon rack, neat posture perfect. Not for vanity, but for presence. Lorraine sat across the aisle with her attorney, a man who looked like he'd aged 10 years since taking the case. Her once flawless composure was gone. The weeks had stripped it from her. Her hair was dull, her lipstick uneven. When our eyes met, she looked away first. Judge Helen Portman entered stern, gray-haired, pragmatic. The courtroom rose, then sat. This court has reviewed the evidence the judge began. The forged documents, financial records, and witness testimony clearly establish the defendant's involvement in acts of mortgage fraud and forgery. Lorraine's attorney rose. Your Honor, my client accepts responsibility but requests leniency given her cooperation and lack of prior criminal history. The judge glanced over her glasses. Mrs. Kincaid, do you have anything to say? Before sentencing, Lorraine stood trembling slightly. I just wanted a stable home for my family, she said. I made mistakes, but Harper, she made this into a spectacle. She humiliated me publicly. The judge's tone was flat. Mrs. Kincaid, humiliation is not a legal defense. A murmur rippled through the gallery. The evidence, the judge continued, shows calculated deception over multiple years. However, the court acknowledges your late cooperation and mental health evaluation. Lorraine nodded quickly, clinging to that word acknowledges. Therefore, Judge Portman said voice. Even the court sentences you to 12 months probation, 200 hours of community service restitution to Evelyn Ridgway in the full amount of the forged loan, and a no-contact order with both the plaintiff and Captain Harper Kincaid for 5 years. Lorraine's knees buckled slightly. 5 years, she whispered. You should be grateful it's not 5 in custody, the judge replied. The gavel struck once the sound, like final punctuation on a decade of noise. Mom exhaled shakily. I reached for her hand under the table and squeezed. Her skin was cold but steady. It's over, I whispered. Is it? She asked softly. Legally, yes, I said. Emotionally, that'll take time. As we stood to leave, the press surged forward. Reporters shouted questions. "Captain Kincaid, do you think justice was served, Mrs. Ridgway? How do you feel now that the property's been returned?" I answered none of them. The only sound I acknowledged was the click of cameras as we stepped through the courthouse doors into bright Carolina sunlight. A journalist shouted one last question that cut through the rest. "Captain Kincaid, do you forgive her?" I paused, turned just enough for the microphones to catch it, and said, "Forgiveness isn't required for justice to stand." The flashes went off like gunfire. Outside, Whitaker was waiting near the steps. He wasn't in uniform, just khakis and a crisp shirt, blending in like a ghost of authority. "Captain," he greeted, voice low. "You did it." "Yes, sir," I said. "It's done. Your command review is clear," he added. "Internal Affairs confirmed you acted within both legal and ethical parameters. Fort Liberty's proud of you." "Appreciate it, sir," I said. "But I didn't do it for pride." "I know," he said. "That's what makes it matter." Mom stepped forward, smiling faintly. "You must be the colonel she talks about." "Lieutenant Colonel," he corrected kindly, shaking her hand. "Your daughter's the kind of soldier we quote in training. Professionalism under pressure." "Right?" Mom looked at me with quiet pride. "She's been that way since she was 10. Whitaker chuckled, then nodded toward the crowd. "You might want to clear the steps before the cameras eat you alive." We did. As we reached the parking lot, I noticed Lorraine standing by her car with her attorney. She wasn't shouting now, just staring at the court's entrance like it had swallowed her life. The arrogance was gone. In its place stood something smaller, more human regret maybe, or exhaustion. For a brief second, I almost pitied her. Then I remembered the bruises, the threats, the bottle shattering on my porch. Compassion didn't erase consequence. "Let's go home," Mom said softly. "Home," I repeated. The word felt real again. That evening, the local news replayed clips from the courthouse. The anchor summarized it neatly. Today, justice prevailed for Captain Harper Kincaid and her mother Evelyn Ridgway in one of Fayetteville's most publicized family fraud cases. The property in question has been legally returned to Ms. Ridgway. Captain Kincaid, representing the U.S. Army Military Police, declined further comment. The camera cut to footage of us walking down the courthouse steps, me in uniform, Mom at my side, the wind catching the American flag behind us. It was the kind of image that told a story even without words. I muted the TV, staring at the still frame. Mom set a cup of tea beside me. "You look so composed," she said quietly. "You look free," I replied. She smiled a small, tired smile. "I haven't felt that in years." "Then it was worth it," I said. Every second, she agreed. Later that night, I stood by the window watching the porch light glow against the dark. The glass shards were long swept away, the scratches on my car buffed out. But some marks, the kind people leave on your spirit, take longer to fade. I thought about everything that had led here: the dinner, the command to break my legs, the courtroom, the evidence, the exposure. It had been a long, brutal climb toward daylight. And though the world saw medals and discipline, what it really took was endurance, the kind forged in silence. When the clock struck midnight, I opened my notebook and wrote the final entry of this battle case closed. No regrets. Justice, quiet and complete. The hum of the night outside was steady, like the sound of order returning after a long storm. And for the first time, I believed that peace didn't need to be loud to be real. 2 months passed. Spring turned to the thick humidity of a Carolina summer, the kind that stuck to your uniform and made the world feel heavier than it was. Life had begun to even out again. Mom had started a small garden behind her new house in Chapel Hill, and I spent most weekends helping her haul soil and paint fence posts. On base, I'd resumed full duty as captain, back to briefings, patrol schedules, and morning PT runs that reminded me that structure could be healing. I thought the past was buried until the call came from Fort Liberty Gate Control one hot Thursday afternoon. "Captain Kincaid, ma'am," the corporal said, hesitating like he didn't want to finish the sentence. "There's a civilian here asking for you by name. Says it's urgent. Claims to be your stepmother." My pen froze mid-signature. I looked up at him across the comms desk. "Repeat that." "Lorraine Kincaid, ma'am. She's parked by the visitor's checkpoint. Says she's not armed, just wants to talk." Security asked if we should turn her around, but she said you'd vouch for her. I almost laughed. Tell her to wait, I said, and stood. Whitaker, passing by, raised an eyebrow. Trouble personal, I replied. Then take backup, he said simply. Personal trouble has a way of spilling onto the duty log. 10 minutes later, I stood by the gatehouse, the midday sun cutting sharp lines across the pavement. Lorraine's car sat idling just beyond the security arm, a faded Lexus dull from neglect. She stepped out as I approached, clutching a folder and wearing oversized sunglasses that couldn't hide how tired she looked. Her confidence had drained away, replaced by the nervous energy of someone running on fumes. Harper, she began, voice trembling between pride and desperation. I didn't know how else to reach you. I kept my tone even. You're not supposed to reach me at all. There's a no-contact order. Please, she said quickly, taking a small step forward before the corporal at the gate subtly raised his hand, signaling her to stop. I just need a few minutes. Make them count, I said. She swallowed hard. I need money. The words hit the air like a bad smell, impossible to disguise, lingering with shame. For what I asked, though, I already knew. My attorney dropped me. They're filing an appeal for the restitution order, and She hesitated, eyes darting to the MPs behind me. I can't afford new counsel. My accounts are gone. My friends won't answer. Even your father won't take my calls. He moved to Raleigh, I said flatly. Start it over. That's what happens when you drain every bridge you cross. She flinched, her voice breaking. You don't understand, Harper. You got your clean ending, your mother, your house, your medals. I have nothing left. I made mistakes, but I was trying to hold a family together. You forged documents, I said quietly. You broke the law and tried to destroy two people to feel powerful. That's not holding anything together. That's control. Her jaw trembled. I was scared, she said softly. Scared of losing him. Scared of being alone. So you made sure everyone else would be, I replied. She took another half step, voice cracking. I need your help, please. Just a loan. I'll pay you back when this is over. Lorraine, I said, keeping my tone steady. You're standing outside a military installation asking for money from the person you spent years trying to ruin. Do you even hear yourself? Her eyes flooded, mascara streaking down her cheeks. I'm begging you, Harper. You don't have to forgive me, just don't let me drown. The corporal beside me shifted slightly, waiting for my cue. I took one measured breath, letting the silence stretch until the wind itself felt thick with tension. Then I stepped forward, just enough that my voice carried clearly. Ma'am, I said, calm and professional, every word deliberate step away from my property. She froze. What? This installation, this uniform, this piece I built, all of it is mine to protect. You are not welcome here. Her tears broke loose. You can't mean that, she whispered. You're really going to turn me away. You did that yourself, I said. Months ago, with every lie, every threat, every night you made my mother afraid to sleep. Actions have gravity, Lorraine. You can't just walk back into the light after standing in your own shadow. You sound just like your father, she spat suddenly, anger flashing through grief. Cold. Self-righteous. No, I said. He enabled you. I ended it. Behind me, 2 MPs moved subtly into position. Staff Sergeant Rivers and Corporal Ames, both silent but ready. The posture wasn't aggressive, just procedural. Presence mattered more than force. Lorraine's eyes darted between them, realization dawning. You brought guards, she said, her voice small. No, I said. They're not here for me. They're here for order. She tried one last desperate card. You'll regret this. When the world turns on you, you'll remember I asked nicely. The world doesn't scare me, I said. You used to. She stared at me, shaking as if searching for the version of me she once could manipulate, but that version was long gone. The soldier standing before her didn't argue, didn't justify, she enforced. I nodded once to Rivers. Escort her to the outer perimeter. Lorraine's voice broke into sobs. Harper, please. Don't make them. They'll make sure you get home safe, I interrupted. That's more kindness than you ever showed us. As they guided her back toward the car, she turned once more, clutching the folder to her chest. "You think you've won?" she said hoarsely. "But you'll never really be free of me." I met her gaze without flinching. "Freedom doesn't require forgetting," I said. "It requires boundaries." She blinked, disoriented by the calm in my tone, then stumbled into the driver's seat. The Lexus sputtered, coughed, and rolled down the access road until it vanished behind the pines. The air felt still again. Rivers exhaled quietly. "You good, ma'am? I'm fine," I said. "Thanks for standing by." "Always, ma'am," he said. "She's off base property now." Gate logs recorded. Incident timestamped. "File it under trespass attempt, no escalation," I instructed, "and make sure the footage is archived." "Yes, ma'am." As they walked back toward the gatehouse, I stood for a moment longer, watching the road stretch into the distance. The same road I'd driven down hundreds of times after long shifts, tired but steady. This time, it looked different, cleaner, like closure itself had paved it smooth. When I turned to go, Whitaker was waiting by the Jeep. He must have watched the entire exchange from the visitor lot. "You handled that like an officer," he said, "and like someone who's done being haunted." "I didn't need to raise my voice," I said. "That's what makes it sting." He smiled faintly. "Control is louder than chaos when it's earned." Maybe I said. "But it's heavier too." "You'll sleep lighter tonight," he said. "That's what matters." He was right. That evening, I called Mom. She came to the gate. I said simply, "Lorraine." She asked the name, catching like a cough. "Yes." She wanted money. I told her no. Did she cause trouble? Not enough to matter. "You did the right thing," Mom said softly. "Some people only understand distance." I stared out at the sunset through my window, the sky bleeding orange over the barracks. "It's strange," I said. "I thought I'd feel angry, but I just feel done." "That's peace," Harper Mom said. "It doesn't shout. It just stays." After the call, I wrote my final incident note for the day. Attempted contact by prohibited individual. No escalation. Dismissed with professionalism. Then I shut the notebook, exhaled, and sat back. Outside, the flag above headquarters rippled gently in the evening wind. The base loudspeaker announced end-of-day taps, a haunting, familiar melody that marked both endings and beginnings. I stood automatically, hand to chest, watching the last light fade behind the tree line. For months, I'd been bracing for the next blow, the next confrontation. But this was different. The fight was over. Not because I'd destroyed my enemy, but because I'd stopped letting her define what peace looked like. In the silence that followed taps, I whispered mostly to myself, mission complete. Then I turned off the light, locked the office, and walked toward the barracks as the sky dimmed to gold. The morning ceremony wasn't large, just a few rows of folding chairs outside battalion headquarters, a podium draped in the flag, and the faint smell of summer rain still clinging to the asphalt. Soldiers in pressed uniforms lined up with practiced precision boots clicking voices low. Fort Liberty had seen 1,000 ceremonies like it, but this one, Whitaker said, mattered for the right reasons. "Captain Harper Kincaid," he announced, stepping forward, citation folder in hand. "For professionalism under pressure, civic integrity, and conduct becoming an officer of the United States Army Military Police." The words landed heavier than I expected. When he pinned the Army Commendation Medal just above my service ribbons, I felt the faint chill of the metal against my chest, a physical reminder of everything that had brought me here. "You didn't win a battle," Whitaker said quietly as he straightened the clasp. "You won clarity. That's rarer." "Thank you, sir," I said. "You've also got a letter to the promotion board," he added, slipping a folded envelope into my hand. "Major Select List convenes next quarter. I'm recommending you personally." I blinked. "That's unexpected?" "Not undeserved," he said, a faint grin tugging at his lips. "You've been an example of what right looks like even when the situation's wrong." The unit photographer snapped a few photos. I stood at attention, the sun warming my shoulders, the base flag snapping high above. But what I felt wasn't triumph, it was stillness. For months, my life had been one long collision between duty and blood discipline and chaos. Now it was just steady. After the ceremony, Whitaker joined me under the awning outside HQ, away from the noise of soldiers dispersing. "What's next for you, Harper?" he asked. "Teaching," I said, after a pause. "Maybe not forever, but for now." "Good choice," he said. "We're assigning you to teach the new Conflict De-Escalation for MPs block next month. Curriculum's dry, but you'll bring it to life." I smiled. "You just volunteered me, didn't you?" "Rank has its privileges," he said, "and I trust yours." The next few weeks passed in a rhythm that felt almost foreign after everything that had come before. I drafted lesson plans, rewrote scenarios based on real incidents, and added one line to every syllabus cover sheet. Professionalism under pressure isn't silence, it's precision. The day I walked into the classroom for the first session, 20 young MPs sat waiting fresh-faced soldiers barely out of training, their boots too clean, their confidence untested. "Morning, Captain," they greeted. "At ease," I said, setting my folder on the desk. "Today, we're going to talk about what happens when order meets emotion, when your training's tested by someone you care about, or by someone who wants to break you." A few exchanged curious looks. I continued. "You'll face situations where control feels impossible, but control isn't the absence of feeling, it's the decision to stay within your values when everything around you doesn't." I watched as they leaned forward, attentive. It struck me how much I saw myself in them before the scars, before the calm, hard-earned through chaos. During one exercise, a soldier named Ruiz raised his hand. "Ma'am," he said, "what if you can't stay calm? What if it's personal?" I thought of that night at the dinner table, the command to break her legs and the sound of a glass shattering somewhere behind me. "Then you pause," I said, "just long enough to choose action over reaction. The difference between the two decides whether you're writing a report or being written about." The room was silent. Then Ruiz nodded slowly, the lesson sinking in. After class, a young specialist lingered behind. "Ma'am," she said quietly, "my stepdad's been trying to contact me. I didn't know how to handle it until today." "Thank you." I met her eyes. "Handle it with boundaries, not anger. And if you ever feel unsafe, report it. The Army protects its own." She nodded, a mix of relief and courage in her face, and left. I exhaled slowly. Some wars repeated themselves in other people's lives. You just learned to hand them the map out. Later that afternoon, Whitaker stopped by the training room. "Heard you turned a doctrine lecture into a therapy session," he said with a smirk. "Just realism, sir," I said. "They need to see that composure isn't born, it's built." "That's why you're the one teaching it," he said. "The board meets next month. Don't be surprised when your name shows up on the list." I looked at him. "Sir, I don't need promotion. I just need purpose." "Then you've already got what rank can't give," he said. Weeks later, his prediction came true. I opened my inbox one crisp October morning to see the header subject promotion board results. Congratulations. My breath caught. Major Harper Kincaid. It didn't change who I was, but it validated the path every late night, every test of restraint, every decision to take the harder, quieter route. That weekend, Mom insisted on cooking dinner. "No takeout," she said. "We're celebrating properly." Her house in Chapel Hill looked alive again, fresh paint shelves lined with new books, the faint smell of basil from her garden drifting through the open window. "You look lighter," she said as we sat down. "Like you finally put the uniform down even when you're wearing it." "Maybe I did," I said. "Or maybe I just stopped carrying other people's weight." She smiled. "Your father sent a letter," she added, handing me an envelope. "He's living near Raleigh now. Said he's in therapy. Wanted to apologize." I didn't open it. "You going to reply?" she asked. "Not yet," I said. "Maybe someday, but silence can be its own boundary." "That's fair," she said softly. We ate in peace. Outside, crickets sang and the air smelled like rain on pavement. It was the kind of night that made ordinary things feel sacred. When I drove back to base, the roads were empty. I parked near HQ, stepped out, and looked up at the flag again, lit by floodlights steady against the wind. Every fiber of the last year seemed distilled into that view: bruises, hearings, citations, lessons, justice. All of it had brought me here to a place where stillness finally didn't feel like absence. Inside my office, I set the metal box beside the folded recommendation letter and wrote one last note in my logbook. Promotion confirmed. Case closed. Teaching continues. Then, on a blank page below it, I added a quote I'd once heard Whitaker use at a memorial: "Some wars end quietly." That's why peace feels unfamiliar. I closed the book and looked out across the dark base. Reveille would sound again. At dawn, new soldiers would wake, and somewhere another officer would face their own storm. But tonight, the world was calm, and so was I. Autumn came soft to North Carolina. The heat gave way to air that smelled faintly of pine and the promise of rain. In Chapel Hill, leaves turned amber and fell across narrow sidewalks where old oaks leaned like tired sentinels. Mom's little house sat near the end of a quiet street, painted pale yellow with white shutters, a house that finally felt like it belonged to her. When I arrived that first weekend after the move, she was outside in the garden, kneeling in the soil, planting hydrangeas along the fence line. Her hands were covered in dirt, her hair tied up under a faded sun hat, and she was humming to herself. For years, I'd watched her flinch at the sound of raised voices, at sudden movements, at footsteps that came too close. Now she didn't flinch at all. "You're early," she said, smiling as I walked up the path. "Traffic was light," I said, shrugging out of my uniform jacket. "Besides, I wanted to beat the rain." "You always do," she said, standing to brush off her hands. "How's base life busy? I've been teaching more than I thought I would. The recruits actually listen." "That's because you've earned it," she said. "People trust calm." I laughed softly. "They trust results. Calm just helps them get there." We spent the next few hours painting the fence, me rolling her brushing edges with careful precision. The rhythm was simple grounding. Birds chattered overhead, and somewhere down the street a lawnmower buzzed lazily. For once there was no tension, no expectation, just the quiet certainty of progress measured in brushstrokes. "I forgot how peaceful this can be," she said. "You built it," I replied. "Peace doesn't show up, it's constructed." Sounds like something your colonel would say, she teased. He'd probably turn it into a PowerPoint slide. She chuckled, the kind of genuine laugh I hadn't heard in years. "You've changed, Harper." "So have you?" I said. "For the better." She nodded, dipping her brush back into the paint tray. "I used to think survival meant endurance, holding your breath until things stopped hurting. But now, I think it means breathing again when you finally can." I paused mid-roll, her words sinking in. "That's going in my next class." "Take it," she said. "No royalties." When the fence was done, we sat on the porch steps sipping lemonade, watching the last light settle over the yard. The world felt slow, like it was finally catching up to our heartbeat. "Do you ever hear from your father?" she asked gently. "He sent another letter last week." I didn't open it. "Maybe someday," she said. Maybe, I admitted, but not yet. "He chose silence for years. I can choose it now, too." She nodded. "That's fair." The wind rustled through the hydrangeas, and I realized something that had eluded me all this time. Justice wasn't supposed to feel triumphant. It was supposed to feel balanced, like a weight being set down instead of thrown. "You know," she said after a while, "there's something poetic about how it ended. You never shouted, you never broke. You just stood there until truth spoke louder." I smiled. "Sometimes justice doesn't roar, it just keeps you standing." She looked at me for a long moment. "That sounds like something you should write down." "Already did," I said, thinking of my notebook on base. Right under the line that says "Case closed." That night, I stayed in the guest room, the one that smelled faintly of new paint and cedar. Rain started sometime after midnight, tapping softly against the window. I dreamed of nothing dramatic, just quiet things, sunlight on metal pages, turning footsteps echoing down a hall that no longer led to confrontation. The next morning, I woke early and walked the neighborhood before breakfast. The air was cool, the pavement damp. A couple of joggers passed, nodding politely. It struck me how ordinary it all was and how rare ordinary had felt these past months. When I got back, Mom was already making coffee. "You're up early," she said. "Habit," I replied. "The Army teaches you to chase sunrise." "Well," she said, "today it chased you." We laughed, and for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like laughter was a fragile thing. Over breakfast, she told me she'd started volunteering at the local library. They needed help with the veterans reading program, she said. "You'd be surprised how many of them just want someone to talk to." "That's how healing works," I said. "It's just conversation disguised as purpose." She smiled. Then I'm finally fluent. Before I left, she handed me a small box wrapped in brown paper. Don't open it until you're back on base, she said. What is it? Just something for your desk. When I returned to Fort Liberty that afternoon, I unwrapped it. Inside was a framed photo of us standing outside the courthouse the day of the verdict. She'd cropped out the reporters, the microphones, everything except the two of us, her in navy blue, me in uniform holding hands as we walked down the steps. Under the photo, she'd written in neat handwriting, "Not the day justice was served, the day peace began." I set it on my desk beside the metal box. It felt like closure in physical form. Over the next few weeks, life continued its new rhythm. I taught my classes, mentored a few junior officers, even found time to attend the base's autumn fair. People came and went, cases started and closed, but the noise of urgency no longer lived inside me. One evening, Whitaker stopped by my office. I hear your mom's got quite the garden now, he said. You've been reading her Facebook, I teased. Command has ways of keeping tabs, he said with a grin. Then more seriously, I wanted to tell you something. The board reviewed your commendation case for public release. They're including it in the MP Ethics Manual next year. I blinked. They're publishing it anonymized, he said. But yes, your conduct's now a case study in conflict de-escalation and professional restraint. You'll help teach soldiers you'll never even meet. I sat back stunned. That's bigger than a medal. That's legacy, he said simply. And you earned it the hard way. After he left, I sat in silence for a while, the weight of those words settling deep. Legacy wasn't about glory. It was about leaving behind a method others could use to survive their own storms. That weekend, I visited Mom again. The hydrangeas had taken root, blooming pale blue under the crisp October sky. She was pruning them when I walked up. They grew fast, I said. They had the right soil, she said. Same as us. I helped her finish the yard work, then we sat in the shade drinking iced tea, the world unhurried. You know, she said every time I look at that fence, I think about how it started chipped and uneven. Now it looks brand new. Paint hides the scars, I said. No, she corrected gently. It honors them. The wind shifted, carrying the sound of distant church bells. For once, I didn't feel the urge to move to fix to anticipate the next crisis. Stillness wasn't emptiness, it was arrival. As the sun dipped low, I stood to leave. You good here? I asked. More than good, she said, touching my hand. Go make sure those soldiers of yours remember what peace looks like. I nodded, kissed her forehead, and walked to the car. As I drove back toward the base, the sky burned gold through the trees, and I thought about everything that had happened, the command shouted across a dinner table, the police lights, the courtroom, the gate, the garden. Justice had started as noise, but it ended in quiet. And sometimes that's the loudest sound there is. Where are you watching from? Drop your location and time, and tell me how this story reached you in this moment. Was it on your couch after dinner on a night shift break, or with morning coffee while the house is still quiet? If you believe calm truth beats loud lies, what would you have done? I am asking not for drama, but for clarity, because this community is a place where steady voices carry farther than shouting. This channel is for people who have lived long enough to know that real strength looks like restraint, that a single documented fact can do more than a room full of raised voices, and that a closed door said with authority can be louder than 100 threats. If you felt your pulse rise when the order came out of someone who thought cruelty was leadership, if you felt your hands tighten when the room turned and blamed the person who finally said enough, I want to hear your story. Tell me the moment you learned to hold your ground without becoming what you stood against. Tell me the sentence you now keep in your pocket for when a bully tries to borrow your spine. Share the boundary that saved your peace. Share the quiet habit that helped you rebuild. When you write it, you are not only helping yourself name it, you are handing a lifeline to someone who is scrolling at 2 a.m. and needs a map out of the fog. If you have been that person who kept a family together for years by swallowing the truth, I see you. If you have been the one who carried the paperwork no one else wanted to face, I see you. If you have been the sibling who was told to behave while someone else was allowed to erupt, I see you. Your voice belongs here. We do not glamorize confrontation. We practice preparation. We do not chase revenge. We pursue consequence. We do not tell you to fight fire with fire. We remind you that water puts fires out and paper keeps them out. Like this video if you believe paperwork beats intimidation and that patience plus proof is a kind of courage. Subscribe if you want weekly stories where the loudest person in the room stops winning and the quiet person finally stands. Tap the bell so you do not miss the moment when the public exposure arrives and the mask falls. Comment with your state and the time you are watching so other viewers can find someone near them and feel a little less alone. If you are outside the United States, drop your city too. The map we paint together in the comments is not decoration. It tells someone in a small town that they are part of something bigger than their front porch. If this story gave you language for something you have lived, save it to your watch later so you can share it with the person who says they cannot leave because no one will believe them. Share it with the friend who is deciding whether to speak up at a family event. Send it to the neighbor who thinks they need louder anger when what they really need is stronger evidence. And if you are in a place that feels unsafe right now, your first step is not to comment, but to protect yourself. Call local services, a trusted friend, or if necessary, emergency responders in your area. Your safety matters more than any algorithm. Nothing here is legal advice. These are stories about patterns and about choices that invite consequences through lawful steps. Now, a few questions for you to answer in the comments. Which moment turned the tide for you? Was it the first time someone recognized your professionalism and said, "I believe you"? Was it a judge who read the record and made the ruling that gave you your keys back? Was it a morning when your house finally sounded like peace? What line did you write and keep for the next time the past came knocking? Mine is simple. "Sir, step away from my property." Yours might be different. Maybe it is. Please put that in writing. Maybe it is. We will continue this when all parties are calm. Maybe it is I am not available for this conversation. Write it in the comments so others can borrow it until they find their own. What object symbolizes your recovery? A new set of keys. A folder where the paperwork finally lives. A pair of walking shoes for morning routines. A mug from the first peaceful breakfast you made in your own kitchen. Name the object and tell us the story behind it. If you are a veteran or a spouse or someone who wears a uniform, what part of the story rang true about professionalism under pressure? What would you add to help a civilian understand that calm is a skill that is trained, that you do not rise to the occasion so much as fall back on your training? If you are a teacher or nurse or first responder, tell us how you speak calm into heated rooms. For those who grew up in the South or in small towns where everyone knows who sits where on Sunday, how does public exposure land where you live? Do people change their behavior when the room sees what they did, or do they double down? What helps truth stick once it is spoken? If you were the quiet sibling who became the steady adult, what would you tell your younger self about the years ahead? If you were the parent who finally chose safety over appearances, what would you say to someone standing at the same threshold you once faced? Write a message to them. Keep it specific and kind and strong. When you comment, remember the tone that makes this place different. We disagree without contempt. We share without turning the volume up to prove we were hurt. We do not diagnose strangers. We do not name call. We put courage and care in the same sentence, and we move the thread forward. If you want more stories like this one, where the moment of public exposure is earned, where the audacity return gets a firm no, and where the final act sounds like peace rather than fireworks, tell me which setting you want to visit next. A retirement dinner, a rehearsal brunch, a graduation cookout, a hospital waiting room, a church parking lot after service. Each space carries its own rules and its own kind of silence. Tell me what you want the protagonist to carry next time. A worn notebook of dates and amounts, a flash drive with scanned deeds, a simple sentence practiced in the mirror, a neighbor on speakerphone, a quiet witness who stands 3 steps behind and says, "I saw it." If this is your first time here, welcome. You will see that we pace these stories with emotional undulation for a reason. Older viewers have told me that life does not move in a straight line. It swells, it drops, it steadies. Then it surges again. We mirror that because it is honest and because it lets you breathe between the heavy beats. To the viewers who have never worn a uniform but who have rescued themselves with documentation and patience, you are a kind of guardian too. You refused to become what hurt you. You chose a path that looks quieter on the outside, but that took more bravery than anyone clapping from the cheap seats will ever know. Before you go, push the like button if this helped you name a boundary. It is one click, but it tells the platform to show the video to someone who needs a steady voice tonight. Subscribe if you want the next story, where a different room goes quiet for the right reasons. Share this with one friend and write them a short note that says, "I thought of you while I watched this and I am in your corner." And now we close the loop where we began. Where are you watching from? Drop your location and time and tell me how your community handles loud lies and calm truth. If you believe calm truth beats loud lies, what would you have done? Would you have said nothing and recorded everything? Would you have waited until the room had witnesses? Would you have chosen a single sentence over a speech? There is no perfect answer. There is only the next right step. I will be in the comments for the next hours, reading and pinning practical advice and the strongest one-line boundaries. If your comment could help a stranger find their footing, write it. If you have never commented before, this is your invitation. A single sentence from you can become the turning point in someone else's life. Thank you for being the kind of audience that understands patience is not weakness and proof is not cold. Thank you for making a community where a mother can get her keys back and a daughter can go to work with her head up. Thank you for watching to the end and for turning a story into a cause that does not need shouting to be heard. I will see you in the next episode. Until then, stand steady, speak clearly, write it down, and when the moment comes, let truth do the heavy lifting while you keep your balance.